and 50,000 protesters. Trump asked his supporters to come to the courthouse for protests throughout the day. Miami police are working closely with federal and state law enforcement authorities and have set up a joint command. Police have not erected barricades outside the courthouse, and Miami's police chief says he's seen no credible threats of violence. He says he's expecting a peaceful protest. The former president is facing dozens of charges of mishandling classified and top-secret documents. Greg Allen, NPR News, Miami.
Ukrainian officials say a Russian missile strike in southern Ukraine has killed at least 11 people. The missile hit a residential apartment building, the latest civilian site Russia has targeted. People may be buried under the rubble. The town that was attacked is not far from a dam that was damaged last week. The reservoir it held back supplied the town with more than 2/3 of its water supply. Ukraine and the UN are warning of a huge impact on global food security following the destruction of the Kakaba Dam. The UN's aid chief, Martin Griffiths, said world food prices are bound to rise.
This is a breadbasket. That whole area going towards the Black Sea, Crimea, that is a breadbasket, not just for Ukraine, but for the world. It is almost inevitable that we're going to see huge problems in harvesting and in sowing for the next harvest. So that what we're going to see almost inevitably is a huge impact on global food security. That's what's going to happen.
He spoke to the BBC. The White House will be holding a concert later today in advance of the upcoming Juneteenth federal holiday. NPR's Kelsey Snell reports the holiday itself is celebrated on June 19th.
The Juneteenth concert is set to include actress and singer Audra McDonald, the Fisk Jubilee Singers, singer Jennifer Hudson, and rapper Method Man. The event also comes in the midst of Black Music Month. President Biden signed a bipartisan bill in 2021 making Juneteenth a federal holiday. It commemorates the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. It celebrates the anniversary of June 19, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger proclaimed freedom for slaves in Texas. Biden is scheduled to host the event on the South Lawn. Vice President Kamala Harris is also expected to join in the festivities. Kelsey Snell, NPR News, Washington.
The Labor Department has released the latest report on inflation for the month of May. Consumer prices rose 4% last month over what they were a year ago. It's well below April's gain of 4.9%. Gas prices were lower, along with costs for some groceries. On Wall Street, the Dow's up about 140 points. It's NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A 76-year-old New Hampshire man being held without bail this morning after he allegedly stabbed a nurse at Haywood Hospital in Gardner last night. Gardner police say the incident happened around 8 o'clock. They say the victim is part of the nursing staff at the hospital and was taken to UMass Memorial Hospital in Worcester. Her condition not immediately known. The suspect has been identified as David Nichols of Greenville, New Hampshire. He was arrested at the hospital and charged with assault and battery with a deadly weapon. A new drug for treating Alzheimer's has advocates excited about future treatment of that disease. An FDA advisory panel recently voted in favor of the clinical benefit of Leqembi. It was co-developed by Cambridge-based Biogen. The drug isn't a cure, but it can help slow progression of the disease. Jim Wessler is the New England regional leader of the Alzheimer's Association.
There was a second drug that the FDA approved, but this would be the first disease-modifying drug if the FDA gives a traditional approval over the next 4 weeks that we've ever had in the history of this disease. So it's pretty significant.
The FDA is expected to decide on full approval in July. In sports, Red Sox and Rockies are back at it again tonight at Fenway. Congrats to the Denver Nuggets for being this year's NBA champs. And in the forecast, we should see some sun this afternoon, high mid-70s, cloudy low 50s tomorrow, then maybe some more showers possible throughout the day tomorrow, high near 80 degrees. We're at 68 in Boston right now. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Cy Sims Foundation. Since 1985, supporting advances in science, education, and the arts towards a fairer, more just, and civil society. More information is available at cysimsfoundation.org.
Jim Brady, I am Marjorie Deacon. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library as we do every Tuesday and every Friday, and we are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Oh, I should say, we're going to be joined by Maura Healey, the governor, on Friday here at the Boston Public Library from 12 to 1.
Hi there, Marjorie.
Hi, Jim.
How are you?
Good.
So if you're tuning in hoping we'll talk about former President Trump's arraignment on 37 federal charges for unlawfully retaining government secrets, conspiring to obstruct justice, in other words, stealing and hiding classified documents in a shower at Mar-a-Lago, do not worry, that will come later in the show, virtually our whole last hour. But today we're starting local. You know, we get complacent, I think, here in Massachusetts. It's a progressive bastion, welcoming to all. On this show, we're continually guilty of looking elsewhere, mostly Florida, to decry Ron DeSantis' draconian rollback of LGBTQ rights and his war on everything from literacy to healthcare to black history. But we here are not immune, as we're learning of an anti-pride backlash at a middle school in Burlington. Two town leaders in Billerica say the town should not issue a Pride Month resolution. Last year, we saw multiple neo-Nazi demonstrations in the state, shutting down drag queen story hours in the Seaport in JP, targeting doctors at Brigham and Women's, and demonstrating at the St. Patrick's Day parade with Keep Boston Irish. In Burlington, it is our children targeting their peers. During Pride Month, the Boston Globe reported students tore down rainbow decorations and chanted their pronouns were USA. Phone and text lines are open at 877-301-8970. Are we naive to think Massachusetts is above the hatred that's spewed by the right on LGBTQ rights? Should we focus less on intolerance in other places and focus closer to home? What's your reaction to reading this news about this kind of behavior happening right here in our home state? 877-301-8970.
Well, you know, it's not that surprising when you think that some of this would be seeping into Massachusetts, because I've been reading about these Moms for Liberty, this group. They've got 285 chapters now across 44 states, and what their whole big deal is, we're not going to have anything to do with gender, we're not going to have anything to do with race, we're not going to have any diversity, equity, inclusion programs in the schools. We're going to shut all that down, and they're all around the country. I mean, 44 states is an awful lot of states. And there have been more than, 500 bills targeting LGBTQ community this year, and this endless talk about trans athletes and all this stuff. I don't think it's surprising. And when you think about Target, which, you know, without any kind of a controversy for, a decade now, has been doing all this stuff on Pride, and other department stores have been doing stuff on Pride. Now suddenly they're balking. To me, it's about this growing nationwide backlash, and the fact that 4 candidates on this story that I was reading this morning from the Associated Press, Trump, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, and this other guy, this Vivek Ramaswamy, they are all going to speak at this Moms for Justice, Moms for Liberty group in the presidential race.
But this is Massachusetts, and I would bet most people would say this doesn't happen here, and it happens pretty regularly here. Maybe it's not Florida, but you know what I looked up this morning, which when we try to delude ourselves into thinking we're really different, 1.2 million of our fellow Bay Staters voted for Donald Trump in 2020.
That's right.
So more than 1 million people thought that a guy who espouses that kind of crap was the appropriate person to lead our country.
Well, Jim,
so I guess we shouldn't be surprised. You know what worries me, though?
What?
This is sort of like when I was a lot younger, and a lot of my friends were much more worried about what was happening in foreign nations rather than conflict right here under our nose. And the conclusion I reach, which is, I know, not radical or original, is we often pick things that are easier to deal with because there's not much we can do about them because they're so far away, rather than tougher things where you got to get involved yourself.
What was that bumper sticker? Think global, act local, something like that.
Or
maybe it's the other way around.
But you know, this Burlington thing, this is a middle school where they're destroying these whatever celebration of LGBTQ rights, and they're chanting our pronouns are USA, obviously to diminish and demean kids who don't say their pronouns are USA. It's really appalling behavior.
Well,
and it's just troubling. It's here. And I think we're going to talk to Maura Healey on Friday, who was the first openly lesbian governor in the United States of America. I think we have to spend a little bit more time focused on what are our problems here, again, not just far away. 877-301-8970.
Well, I also think during the gubernatorial race, a lot of us were patting ourselves on the back saying people have almost never mentioned the fact that she's a lesbian.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even an issue in the campaign, and I think we overestimated. And also, Jim, let's face it, you live in Cambridge, I live in Brookline. We're not, this kind of stuff is not going on in the middle schools.
JP's a pretty progressive place where neo-Nazis were outside the drag show at the library.
Yeah, but they weren't from Jamaica Plain.
Well, it doesn't really matter. 877-301-8970. Sarah on the South Shore, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
So I'm calling because I'm a mother of a transgender teenage daughter.
Yep.
And, again, we live in, south of Boston, what we think is, 50-50, we think progressive and not progressive area. And my child's a patient at Boston Children's Hospital, where they've had also bomb threats and death threats. All of the doctors have had threats.
Should have mentioned it. I should have. Yep.
Yeah, that's a big one. I tried to give my daughter a sense of security, saying all the adults got you, you're protected, you're safe, be vigilant, but that you're safe. But and my husband and I, we don't feel that way at all. We're scared every single day.
What are you scared of in particular? And is your kid concerned, scared?
Yeah, she'll bring it up and she'll say there's so much violence against transgender people. And I said, yep, I know, especially transgender women, especially transgender women of color, which we are not. And she's scared, and we're scared of, being targeted, being out in the community and having some random act of violence or a targeted act of violence. You just don't know, because there are so many unhinged, crazy people out there. And yes, we can have all the greatest laws in the world in Massachusetts, but that doesn't stop anyone from coming across state lines that's got a grudge.
Well, but Sarah, it's worse than that. As the point Marjorie made a minute ago, the kids at Burlington Middle School didn't drive in from some faraway state. They're here. They live here. They were raised here, obviously. That's really troubling.
Yes.
Sarah, I also wonder, too, if you've got family in other states that are trying to pass or already have passed all this anti-LGBTQ legislation, I would assume it makes you nervous about going there.
Yeah, no, thankfully the only out-of-state family we have is in Michigan, so we feel it's they're trying their best out there. So.
Okay.
But I mean, it's scary. I told my daughter, she's approaching college age, and I'm like, you're not going to school anywhere outside of Boston. And now I'm like, that's not even safe,
Sarah, we wish your whole family safety and good fortune. Thank you for sharing your story. 877-301-8970. And by the way, this all trickles down, and obviously we get the same information people do elsewhere in the country. Let's listen to this dope from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's on the Charlie Kirk Show, member of Congress, obviously, sharing her thoughts on the pride, the rainbow flag, which she says should not be flown next to the American flag, if anywhere.
To train children to believe that the way they have sex when they get old enough to have sex is how that should identify them as a person is the most perverted, it's abhorrent, it's evil, and it's an attack on our children who are the most innocent among us. And I'm completely disgusted with us. She's a member of Congress, and she was featured in a very favorable interview on 60 Minutes. So I think that's one of our problems, too.
And also, she is, the handmaiden of Kevin McCarthy, who's the most powerful Speaker of the House and a very powerful guy. And he's decided that he's going to bow down to her on almost everything that she believes in.
Am I not right, by the way, even though there was some condemnation, isn't there a member, Jamie, can you check this? Isn't there a member, I don't know if he's still a member, of the Republican State Committee who was trashing the gay guy who was running against Jim McGovern? Particularly the fact that he had children. I don't want to get that wrong.
Yes, there was.
Again, that's here.
Yeah, that's here in Massachusetts.
That's the Republican Party in our state. Under, I was going to say late in that he was voted out of office, Jim Lyons, the former chair.
Francesca from New Jersey, thanks for calling.
Hey, Francesca.
Hi. First, I wanted to say that America should be a place for everyone to feel comfortable and safe, and we've long known that it's not.
Yeah.
So, but I'm moving to Boston. I'm a black woman, and often when I tell people that I'm moving to Boston, they tell me, oh no, it's so racist, it's so sexist and homophobic and elitist. So there is a conversation that maybe many Bostonians don't know about, that's about how Boston is being seen by others. So,
Francesca, I don't
Yeah.
think there are many Bostonians who have not heard that conversation. Some are in denial about the history. Some, and I'm among them, who have better hopes for the future when you have a woman and a person of color as the first mayor of our city who doesn't shy away from talking about it. But the history is the history. And
Well, I've heard the racist a million times. I've
Yeah.
not heard homophobic very much.
Nor have I.
I think that's what I would be surprised at, Francesca, is the homophobic, because, we were the first state with gay marriage. We had the first gay marriages here. I thought we were more progressive. The racism I probably heard hundreds of times.
And we've talked about it hundreds of times.
Yeah, we've talked about it hundreds of times.
Go ahead, Francesca.
yes, and I just want to say, as much as representation matters, it's time for us to live up to those standards of what we say we're representing and what we're seeing. Just because we see a black president, or we see a black mayor, or we see somebody with a brown face, or we see the first gay marriage, it doesn't mean that we're absolved of dealing with the sins of our relationships with people and how we perceive and see each other on a regular basis in our community. So
That was perfect.
Thank you, and
we
I'll
hope you'll
continue
call
to-
us when you move here a lot. Francesca,
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very much.
For the call. 877-301-8970 is the number. Are you getting your text messages, Jim?
I hadn't looked, actually.
Yeah.
I'll check them out in a second.
I don't think I'm getting any texts.
877-301-8970. Let's go to Lexington. Richard, you're next on Boston Public Radio.
Yes, I've lived in lots of parts of the country, and I notice I've been here for about 20 years. I live in Lexington, and I noticed that we're balkanized here. I live within a few hundred yards of both Burlington and Woburn, and they're totally different in terms of social structure and other things, racial mix, and I think that's part of the problem in suburban Boston.
I mean, so you, in general, feel that in suburban Boston?
Yes,
Huh.
yeah. Just
So you're
look
saying
at
that-
Lexington
so- yeah.
and look at Woburn and look at the difference, and we're right next to each other.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When you think of Lexington as being very progressive, you think of Concord as being very progressive. I don't know that much about Burlington. I think of Burlington as much more of a mix of people. But in the schools, like in Lexington, and I know like in Brookline where my kids went, and in Cambridge where your kids went, there was constant talk about the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, but it's different than living in a medium-sized town in the Rocky Mountains where everybody has to mix every day.
Yeah.
Latino, black, every color, every ethnic group. Here we don't mix.
You don't think we mix?
Well, there is a
No.
decent amount of segregation in this city. I think it's true. And we
Yeah.
learned from that study out of Harvard a year or so ago that it's not just segregation in terms of where people live, but segregation in terms of where people socialize, shop, and all those kind of things.
So, Richard, you mean black, white, Latino,
Right.
rich, poor, the whole
The whole spectrum,
Well,
the whole spectrum. Because of the way the taxes are, we pay high property taxes here in Lexington, but probably half as much in Waltham, for instance.
Well, that's that's a great point. That's a great point, Richard. Thank you very much,
Richard,
for
thank
the
you.
call.
By the way, I was right. I shouldn't say even because he was good on the issue. Baker called on the GOP to condemn, the state GOP to condemn the state committee member who was making anti-gay remarks about the challenger to Jim McGovern. That's right here, and it's a person in an official position elected to sit on the state Republican committee. I mean, it's really pathetic. Ann in Shrewsbury, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I am the mom of two queer kids. They're adults out in the world doing well, but I live in fear every day for their lives, and I really mean that because they are advocates and allies, and the thing I think, Jim, you're right. We should not delude ourselves in Massachusetts. We think we're safe. We are not. We are not. And we need to be more vigilant, especially as allies. I mean, you got to stand up and say what you believe in. Like with your friend groups and your church groups and I'm finding shockingly that more friends don't support that community than do.
When you say don't support it, mean don't. aggressively and affirmatively support it or are on the wrong side? Well, one could argue that if you're not, to quote one of our guests at noon, Ibram X. Kendi, if you're not anti-racist, affirmatively anti-racist, then you're not part of the solution. So which is it for you, Ann?
I think it's I agree with him, and I think it's like in the Catholic Church, for example, if you're against gay marriage, you're against equality. Mm-hmm. Period. Yeah. I just feel like you're either equal or you're not, right? And I'm having a hard time. My kids keep telling me, "Mom, some of your friends don't think I have the same rights their kids do," and every time they say that, I go, I got to rethink how I'm doing things. So. But I really think there's going to be violence because it's just being promoted by the right.
Ann, thank you much for your call. We appreciate it. By the way, can we mention these two Billerica, what are they, town committee members, local leaders who voted against these resolutions during Pride Month? They were outvoted. I think the vote was 3-2.
Yep.
I'm not sure, this is a smart comment from Michael Rosa. I'm not sure what adherence to this resolution would mean. It sounds like we're forcing people to do stuff. Yeah, the stuff is be tolerant of their neighbors and the people who live in their communities. It really...
Well, the other guy, John Burrow, said, I don't think the town should be promoting it, which I guess is acceptance of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community. And, I was reminded there was a piece in the Globe today, texture just reminded me of that Ludlow thinking of taking away book selection from the librarians and have it made by the school committee and parents. So this is like catching on.
And the fact that we're not as bad as Florida doesn't mean it doesn't need addressing. Obviously, we're sort of a micro version here.
What I always think, what do people think, that the kids who self-identify as gay, and often you do pretty early, what about them? Are they supposed to not be able to have an opportunity to read books that might help them get through a difficult period in their lives?
Yes. I guess the answer to that is yes.
Well, I guess the answer is no. They're not supposed to get these books.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, they should not.
Okay, we are talking about these disturbing stories about middle school kids destroying stuff in schools that have to do with celebrating Pride Month. And we're asking whether we are a little bit too complacent here in Massachusetts. Do we think we're ahead of the rest of the country when in fact we are not? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. We are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Our number is 877-301-8970.
I'm James Jimmy Hills, host and creator of Java with Jimmy, inviting you to join GBH News and me Thursday at the Boston Public Library for a special live stream. We'll talk about the issues, inclusion, and diversity during Pride Month and celebrate Black Music Month and the power of art to bring people together. Java with Jimmy at the Boston Public Library, Thursday evening from 5 to 6:30 and live streaming on YouTube at youtube.com/GBH News.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate empowering seniors to reach their full potential through senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more. You can consider Hebrew Senior Life at allweareforyou.org. And Southeastern Records, presenting Weather Vanes, the new album from Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit. Available now, wherever music is sold.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. Somewhere around 1 o'clock, we'll talk to Sue O'Connell, who is outside the courthouse in southern Florida, where Trump is to be arraigned today at 3 o'clock. And Friday of this week, noon to 1, the governor will join us. Maura Healey will obviously talk to her about what we're talking about here, Billerica and Burlington and all this crap in Massachusetts, because we're doing another Pride check-in as we're learning of incidents of anti-LGBTQ backlash in those places. And we're asking, has the national sickness of this hatred seeped into our state? And are some of us naive to believe that it hasn't been metastasizing here all along? 877-301-8970. I just reread quickly the story by John Elliman and Nick Stoico in the Globe.
Yep.
about, in the Globe about this Burlington Middle School thing. There's nothing in there, which I assume means there hasn't been anything. No apologies from the kids who ripped down the signs and are chanting, my pronouns are USA. No quotes from the parents of these kids.
Well, I think
nothing.
The parents is where the kids got it from.
Well, they may have. They very well may have. But obviously there's no atoning or apologies or nothing, which makes, to my opinion, even worse.
My name is Ron. I live in Uxbridge, Mass. We were recently on the news in Boston because of the vandalism of our celebratory pride flags being stripped from the bridge in town. Thankfully, some dedicated members of the community are continuing to band together to put up more flags as they're stolen, and we're working with the local police department to prevent further theft of a permitted public display. Recently, one of our Board of Selectmen was caught on a hot mic making rude comments regarding the bridge and the participants promoting the Love Bridge in Uxbridge.
Wow. I didn't even know about that. I missed that one.
I guess this is all over the place. 877-301-8970. Declan in Boston. Thanks
for
calling.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Speak.
All right. I'm a student from Florida, Melbourne, Florida, and I have seen LGBTQ displays being torn down in my own school, and I think everyone needs to do more and empower isolated communities to help not only larger issues, but issues that affect smaller groups.
What do you mean smaller groups?
Any sort of minority.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Declan, what school were these displays torn down? Where did you go to school?
Melbourne High School.
Okay. Huh. And what kind of response happens from families, from other students? What kind of response is there?
There is mostly a neutral response to students that I've seen. Most of my friends have had a negative response, but there are many students who have had a positive response to these aggressive actions.
Well, part of the reason I would assume you'd agree you get a positive response is when the elected leader of your state is essentially, in a figurative way, participating in the tearing down. It's not surprising that there's a lot of support for that kind of behavior. Declan, we appreciate your calling, and we wish you the best. Thanks so much.
A texter says, I went to the Pride Parade Saturday, but skipped the festivals on the Common and City Hall as I feared a crowded place and I could be being a target of a shooter. And then another texter says,
that's pretty horrible.
Yeah,
that's
it is pretty horrible. Well, I mean, don't you think that if you're in a crowded place now? And another texter says, all you need to see is the Massachusetts chapter of the Moms for Liberty Twitter and Facebook pages for a feel on Massachusetts tolerance.
Is there, do they have a chapter? I know you said 44 states.
I didn't know.
Are we one of the states?
I thought we were not one of the 44 states, but apparently I'm wrong. You can check that out, maybe with the Twitter page or the Facebook page of Moms for Liberty.
Let's go
and they're all tied, by the way, to Republican politicians.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to Tito in Fitchburg. Hey.
Hey, hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Hi, yeah. So I am calling just to push back on the notion of how it's being presented out there every time people talk about racism and the anti-LGBT, presence in the country. Everybody will push back by telling us that there's been a black president, so the country is no longer racist. And now that in Massachusetts we have a gay governor, we no longer have these views. But however, the same folks from the side that is proposing these notions are the people that once Obama was in office went ahead and, pushed against every initiative that he tried to pass through Congress.
That's a wonderful point.
Like that. And now the same people are on that side are the people pushing, the same people who will say that, look, in Massachusetts, the country is now accepting, equality amongst the gay people and the LGBT folks.
Yeah.
But they are pushing this agenda that's sort of like breezing in from Florida and like metastasizing and infecting the entire country. There's all these undercurrents still exist, and these are the same folks that are sort of trying to leverage the power structure and just perpetrate, the hate.
Tito, I'm sorry, go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, I was just saying that they're just trying to sort of mask it all, behind the veil of we've had this, so how can we then be that?
I think you made a wonderful point and an important point, Tito. There were a lot of people who said racism is over because they wanted people to believe that an election of one man did it, and not only did it not do it, you're right about what kind of blowback he got from the very same people. That was an excellent call. Tito, thanks for making it. Did you see the note about Moms for Liberty?
Yeah, they only have 241 members.
Yeah, well, so...
well, I mean, it's better than 2,400 members.
Yeah, well, they exist here. A Moms for Liberty group in Middlesex County, as Marjorie said on Facebook, has 241 members. Their website lists chapters in Middlesex and Plymouth counties, 2 chapters in southern New Hampshire as well.
And here's someone who understands, I guess, the blowback. This is a texter. There is a big difference between gay, lesbian acceptance versus trans issues, which have just been forced on people with no discussion, forcing people to change their whole speech pattern to uphold someone else's idea of their identity. Since Jenner, there has been no option. That's Caitlyn Jenner, formerly Bruce Jenner, of course. Since Jenner, there has been no option for anyone to do anything but celebrate whatever trans people say is a new reality, and anyone who disagrees is a hateful bigot.
Well, first of all, I don't know if it's forced on anybody. There are trans people. They exist. And I think, frankly, in fairness to those who have a problem, new things are, look at the LGBTQ world. We learned that the more people had a neighbor or a family member who was a gay or a lesbian, the more accepting they were of gays and lesbians. And that will probably happen, hopefully will happen with trans people too. But I don't, this notion of being forced, the only thing that's being forced on people, to the texter, is that everybody be treated respectfully and kindly. I don't think there's a demand that everybody celebrate anything. There's a demand that there be tolerance and acceptance, which I don't think is much of a force.
I'm getting reprimanded by the texters by entertaining the notion that we have a socioeconomic cross-pollination.
What do you mean?
Well, the guy that said Lexington is nothing like Woburn, and I'm getting Andover is nothing like Lawrence, and texters are telling me that the rich towns basically don't interact with the poor towns. That seems to be the overall message here.
And to what end? I'm sorry, and what?
Because I didn't think it was quite that dramatic
I see.
that bad, but I guess people think I'm wrong about that.
We have time for one more.
Jay in Boston, thank you for calling.
Hey, Jay.
Hi, thanks for taking.
Yep.
I would like to say, I know I'm on the counterpoint to you guys.
That's fine.
But I'd like to say, as far as the difference, forcing people, I believe that that's true because, gay and lesbians, there's a difference because when a gay and lesbian couple want to live their life, all you have to do is basically leave them alone. But transgender, it comes from what is a mental diagnosis that you yourself feel like something is wrong with the reality that already exists. And then you ask everyone else to participate in your new reality. And now that's taught
I'm sorry, Jay. What does participate mean? You sound like the texter.
When I have to use someone else's pronouns and someone decides, well, I'm no longer a man, I'm now a woman, and now everyone else has to agree with me that I'm a woman.
No, they don't. You have to agree with anything. You have to be respectful. Jay, you have to be respectful. I think that's a really modest request that one human being makes of another. I hear you, and I hear the anxiety in your voice, but just respect everybody else. You don't have to agree with them. Just be respectful, and maybe we can coexist and get to a better place. Jay, thank you much for your call. Appreciate it.
I think a lot of people with the pronouns things are very understanding. That especially if you're grandma and you're 75 years old or something, it's a little bit difficult for you to go to a they. And I think that people are quite understanding and not going to jump down your throat when you're making an effort to be respectful.
Yeah, but how about Jay? This notion that he's being forced to do so, it doesn't seem to me that's much of an ask for people to respect how people want to be addressed by other people.
That was one of the best lines in this whole thing. People just want to live their lives. Yeah. People just want to live their lives and let them live their lives and be respectful and leave them to lead those lives.
I guess the message of this first half hour is we're not immune here in Massachusetts. And let's try to be as respectful to our fellow people here as we would like to be respected ourselves.
Coming up, Sports Authority Trenny Casey discusses the Denver Nuggets' first ever NBA championship and more on the Live Golf PGA Tour merger and some other sports stuff. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
I'm Marco Werman. We're living through history, and the world's newsroom has the first draft.
If journalists leave a scene, it becomes a black hole. Then the world doesn't find out what's happening. And when the world doesn't know what's happening, human sympathy also evaporates.
Looking for answers and making sense of global events as they happen. Join us on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Walden Local Meat, 100% grass-fed and pasture-raised beef, pork, and chicken, and seafood from local farmers, hand-delivered to your door. Committed to supporting local food for communities. Membership options and more at waldenlocalmeat.com. And South County, Rhode Island, featuring 100 miles of coastline and 20 public beaches. South County visitors can find many ways to enjoy the water in the Ocean State. Learn more at southcountyri.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. Friday, we'll be back at the library. The governor will be here as well from 12 to 1 for Ask the Governor. We're joined now by Trenny Casey. She's an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston and also a BPR contributor. Hi, Trenny.
Hi, guys.
Hey there.
Hello, Trenny. So we're just speaking about LGBTQ issues around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, bringing us to the Red Sox. What's going on with this guy, Matt Dermody?
Well, he's not on the Major League roster anymore. He was called up for a spot start. But the issue that everybody took with it was that and when I first heard this story, it showed up in our, I tell you guys all the time, we do these morning emails about what we want to talk about. And they said, this kid, Matt Dermody, puts out a tweet, I think it was about a year ago, and it said, #Pride Month, and quoted the Bible and said, all homosexuals are going to hell. That was the brunt of it. And he scrubbed it after the Japanese team that he was playing for in the Japanese league told him he had to take it down. But he got into some arguments with people about how it was his religious right and this is what he believes in. Should be noted, my colleague John Tomasi, who is very astute, went and looked at the Bible verse. It also condemned adulterers, and I believe something else, but something that's pretty common.
If it's Leviticus,
it's Corinthians. It was Corinthians.
Corinthians, yeah, that's adultery because it's Leviticus. People usually quote says people that don't observe the Sabbath should be stoned to death. People that eat shellfish should be stoned to death.
If you obey that, then nobody's going to be able to play.
Exactly.
That's a real problem.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So anyway, the Red Sox claim, we do these deep dives all the time before we sign someone and we really look. Well, it took everybody else like one Google search to find this kid. And, I guess the hard part does come where people are allowed to have their religious beliefs, but there's a difference between having a religious belief and then posting it on social media by saying all homosexuals are going to hell with a #Pride Month, which is, it's pointed, right? Like you have the intention of people who are reading tweets about Pride Month, you want them to see this. So it's not just your own personal opinion that you think inside of your head, you're putting it out there for everyone to see. What the controversy that came up is tonight is Pride Night at Fenway Park, and had he stayed in the rotation, he would have been in line to pitch tonight. Thankfully,
but he did pitch during Pride Month, and I have to say, I have great respect for the owners and a lot of the leaders of the Red Sox, and it seems to me, you're right, you have a right to your opinion, you have a right to your employment. And it seems to me they have a history, the Red Sox, being really strong on these issues. Yeah. The answer is you dump the guy.
Well,
don't let him pitch. Dump him. I mean, let him go do this crap
And listen,
somewhere else.
Not that this should matter if you're acting like a jerk, like an intolerant jerk, but he's not even good. It's not even like they put everything on the line for someone who's like the next superstar. And we see it all the time in athletics. You're willing to put up with more when someone is supremely talented. Like, this is a journeyman pitcher who's 32 years old. Oh, and the point I was making, sometimes people put up tweets and messages and opinions when they're younger, right? And you think, okay, allow them. I think you should have some time. Like, if you put up a tweet when you're 16 and it's unearthed when you're 27, you learn a lot between 16 and 27, or even 21 and 29 or 30.
You could learn a lot.
Well, you could, but if it's not repeated and it doesn't come up again, I don't think it should be held against you. He was 30, he's now 32. Like, this isn't someone who's like looking to evolve and be accepting of people. And also, I know there aren't any openly gay players on the Red Sox, and I use the word openly because we don't know. And this environment that is created, in particular for male pro athletes, like, do you guys watch Ted Lasso?
Yes,
I don't watch every episode.
Did you watch the whole
No,
season?
not the whole thing.
So one of the storylines this year, and I don't think this is going to give anything away for someone who hasn't watched it yet, but one of the storylines this season is about a player on the team who is gay and hides it from his teammates because he's terrified of not only how his teammates will perceive him, but how the fans will perceive him. And of course, it's Ted Lasso, so it has a happy ending, and everybody's accepting and whatnot. But that's a real fear for in particular male athletes, that they cannot be who they are. And you can't tell me that there are not more gay players across all sports. But almost none of them come out because it is an environment that is created to keep them silent and suffering.
We should also
guys
mention,
like this that are part of the problem.
But so we're not always all negative all the time, which we are too often. There's a wonderful story over the weekend in the Globe, I can't remember who wrote it, about Charlie McAvoy, who plays for the Bruins, who goes out with his fiance and their little dog and actively participates in the Pride March on Saturday. Yeah. And that's pretty terrific.
Well, you know what the thing is about people claiming their religious things? You got to be consistent, because as I mentioned before, the Leviticus, he's talking about Corinthians in the New Testament, but the New Testament also says be nice to your slaves. Right. You condone slavery. So if
also one of the 10 commandments, treat your neighbor like thyself. Yeah. Like, isn't that one of the basic tenets?
If you're going to say I'm doing this because of my religion, then you've got to be able to stone people who go to the mall on Sundays. Yeah. I mean, you got to be able to stone. You got to say slavery's okay. Otherwise, there's.
Are we talking about stoning? Is that like our segue to the live?
Before we get to that, by the way, in a press conference, I guess, or somewhere, this Dermody guy said, I wouldn't be hurtful. And as your colleague John Tomasi writes, what part of all gays are going to hell during Pride Month isn't hurtful? And I think that says it all. Yeah. Can we go to another story? I usually don't care at all about any teams that don't play in my hometown of Philadelphia or in my adopted hometown of Boston. I was totally into the Denver Nuggets.
What's not to like?
And they won last night. Here are the final few seconds from the NBA Finals on ESPN with the Nuggets beating the Miami Heat. Here it is.
Finds Strus back to Larry. There it is, three-pointer. Won't go. Rebound, Caldwell Pope. They're not going to foul. The Heat will let it play out. It's over. At last, the long wait is over. After 47 years, the Denver Nuggets can finally call themselves NBA champions.
You know, one of my favorite parts of this, the guy Jokic, who is like one of the great sort of, I don't know, slow, unathletic-looking big men.
He's a unicorn. That's
he
what
is the lowest drafted player to ever win the MVP in the finals. That's pretty exciting,
Second round player. Great. And he's not really what the NBA is today, right? Like fast break, three-point shooting.
He's not ripped.
Massive dunks, right? He's not ripped. He's a Serbian player. Was drafted in the second round, but just has he had, I don't know how many triple doubles he had in the NBA Finals. I'd have to go back and look at the total number. But a triple double is when you score in the double digits in points, double digits in rebounds, and double digits in assists. Wow. He makes, I think what's the most incredible thing about him is that he makes everyone else around him better. Passer. So they had a great stat early in the series, ESPN did. When Nikola Jokic scores 40 or more points, I think the Nuggets only win something like 5 or 7% of the time. But when he scores under 40 points per game and grabs at least 10 rebounds and has at least 8 assists, an assist is when you get the basketball to someone else and they have and they make the shot. Their win percentage is something like 87%. Like, it's insane. Like, he is just an all-around team player. And you know what else I liked about this? If we want to draw the parallel back to the Celtics, first of all, him and Jamal Murray.
Murray is great.
Figured out a way to complement one another, which has been a real struggle for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But the other thing, there was this whole mantra this year with Joe Mazzulla. You got to take 43-point attempts. You got to take 43-point attempts. 3-point is the only way to win. You got to shoot threes. The problem with the Celtics is sometimes you just don't have your 3-point shot.
Yeah.
When you can't shoot the 3-pointer, it's really hard to win. Like, you have to have more tricks in your bag. The Denver Nuggets yesterday took 28 3-point attempts and only made 5, and they won the NBA title.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, to me that statistic in particular stood out to me because there's just such an emphasis with the Celtics and the Celtics team, not on defense and those mid-range jumpers, driving the lane, drawing a foul. It's all about shoot the three, but sometimes the 3 doesn't work. So I'm hoping that they're sitting at home watching this, taking notes.
Okay, so what's going on with the Saudi Arabian Golf League and the PGA?
Well, it's in some litigation now, so which is probably going to push everything even farther back. But
the government may challenge whatever it is, the partnership.
Right, the merger.
Which government?
Ours.
The U.S. government.
Sort of an antitrust kind of thing, I think, or an anti-competition kind of thing.
But since we last spoke, and when we talked last Tuesday, it was breaking. Like, it had just come out maybe a half hour, 45 minutes before we had a chance to talk. Rory McIlroy, I believe, spoke the next day, the day before the RBC Canadian Open, and his sound was unbelievable. But he also sounded resigned to the fact that this is going to happen. Right, like he feels, and he has been, I would say, the biggest name and the most vocal not supporter of LIV, detractor of LIV. He even said in his this press conference, "I hate LIV. I hope LIV goes away." But the way it seems right now, guys, as more details continue to sort of leak out, it seems like it may be. So there's 3 tours that are involved in this merger: the PGA Tour, LIV Golf Tour, and the DP World Tour. So the DP World Tour is basically, it's the European version of the PGA Tour. It's not as prestigious as the PGA, but it's the other big one in the world. And right now, you can play on the PGA Tour and you can compete in events no problem in the DP World Tour. But when everything went down with LIV, the rule was if you were a PGA Tour player, you could not compete in LIV golf events. So it sounds like what this is going to do is, at least in the beginning, keep all 3 entities separate. But what you'll have the option, like, you won't be able to say to Rory McIlroy, well, if they're going to pay you $300 million to come play in 3 events, he would be able to go play in 3 LIV events for $300 million and then come back and continue to play in PGA Tours. That's how I'm understanding it. I think there's a lot to be shaken out. But Rory made a great point, too, because he was asked about how angry he was. So keep in mind, these guys, like Rory McIlroy, I believe was offered $500 or $600 million to join the LIV Tour. Tiger Woods was offered $800 million. He turned it down. So there are some big name golfers who turned down huge money to stick with the PGA and try to keep the PGA the way it is. And Rory McIlroy said, I feel like a sacrificial lamb. Yeah. I gave up all of this money, and now you just went behind our backs and you merged with this league anyway, when I could have been making a ton of money and I could have just walked away.
So is there any reason, I don't understand much of the details, but since the Saudis have unlimited money, is there any reason to believe that the guy who ordered the murder of Jamal Khashoggi is not going to own every pro sport eventually?
So,
you bought the PGA. Why don't they buy baseball, buy football? I'm serious, by the way.
So this has been a conversation, and in the NFL, it is I don't think they would buy the NFL.
Well, whatever, partnership, whatever.
Well, I don't know that they'll buy these leagues, Jim, but what keeps them from buying a team and then influencing the way that those leagues are run, right? So the most common name that keeps coming up is that they made the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like, they could buy the Jacksonville Jaguars away from Shad Khan, who is a Pakistani immigrant, Pakistani American, one of the only minority owners in all of football. But the problem is, the Jaguars are only okay. They need a new stadium. He would need public funding. But the Saudis could come in, they could buy the Jacksonville Jaguars, they could pay out of pocket for this brand new multi-billion-dollar stadium and probably area around it. Shad Khan would make a ton of money, he would just walk away, and then the Saudis would get a foot in the door. And someone said, well, do you think the NFL owners would ever let the Saudis in? And I'm like, have you watched the NFL? Have you paid attention? Like, it's not exactly like there aren't any skeletons in their closet. It's all about money. So yeah, I mean, Jim, we've talked about too, like, let's say NFL owners say, you know what, no, we're not going to let a Saudi buy a team. What stops the Saudis from starting an NFL league in Saudi Arabia and doing the same thing that they did with golf and luring players away with huge money?
I hadn't even thought of that.
Like, those are all things I think that now you have to take into consideration.
Well, I hope this Mr. Monahan, who's head of the PGA, is sleeping well. I don't think we've been on radio 24 years. I have never played sound from a shot, maybe Tiger Woods, on a golf tournament.
I love this.
I am watching on some videos last night on YouTube, and the Canadian Championship, I think it's called the RBC
Canadian Open.
Canadian Open. This guy, Nick Taylor, they're in the 4th hole of playoffs, and this guy hits a 72-foot putt to win the tournament again on the 4th overtime hole. Here's the which is a pretty good I don't know who the broadcaster is.
I think it's Jim Nance, probably.
Oh, it is?
It's probably Jim Nance.
Okay, well, whoever it is, Nance or whomever, here he is describing the putt.
Swing of the putter. Comes up with some speed. Now up the rise. For the eagle. For the win. To the cup. Take it. Yes! 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 The drought is over. The drought is over. Nick Taylor with the eagle. The 2023 RBC Canadian Open champion. History.
And by the way, what I think he meant is
that's definitely not Jim Nance.
But
that's definitely a Canadian.
A Canadian hadn't won the Canadian Open like in ages.
69 years.
Was it 69 years?
69 years.
And this Nick Taylor guy's Canadian. It's a great video.
That's a much better call than Jim Nance's.
Well,
I was actually going to take you to test. Like, that was a good call. Jim Nance's call was so scripted. That was a great call.
Did you see the security guard that tackled?
So it was.
Describe
honestly,
this. This is great.
So we have this great moment, right, where this guy's only won 2 other times on the PGA Tour.
Yes.
He's going against Tommy Fleetwood, who's never won on the PGA Tour. Was about to win his first, and he hits this unbelievable long putt in the rain in Canada, in front of like his home fans, and his best friend Adam Hoden. Sorry, Adam, I'm screwing up your last name. Anyways, clearly not like that great of a golfer, but they're best friends. They're both Canadians. They're super good friends. So he's got the champagne ready for him, and he goes and he's spraying him with champagne as he wins. And this security guard comes up over the green like he should try out for the Patriots just tackles him to the ground. But
that's horrible.
If you've seen
tackles the champagne bearing guy.
Tackles the golfer because he thinks it's just some random person who ran up, but it was like part of Nick Taylor's not entourage, but like his best friend.
It's like refrigerator Perry coming up to the green.
If you have a chance, though, Google the story and then go look at his wife's Twitter. The guy who got tackled, his wife's Twitter. She is so funny, and my favorite tweet that she put out, and she said, like any good Canadian, he apologized to the security guard for being tackled.
He wasn't hurt, though, right?
I think he was fine. I think if he was hurt, like, we probably wouldn't be laughing about it. Speaking of getting hurt, I know this is totally off the tangent. Did you see Conor McGregor?
No.
Yeah, punched out the mascot
at the Miami Heat
explain who
game.
McGregor is.
So Conor McGregor is, I think he's kind of a dirtbag.
He is.
He's this Irish MMA fighter, like hasn't fought in a long time, but he gets in a lot of legal trouble. He's just kind of a nuisance, but he's got all these like side hustles, and one of them is a pain relief spray. And so he was pushing it at this Miami Heat game, at the game 4. And so he was supposed to do this little thing where he fake punched the Heat mascot, and then it was going to spray him with the pain relief spray. But he knocked the guy out. The guy had to go to the hospital.
I know, it's horrible. We're all laughing because we didn't get knocked out.
He's fine.
It's
like
horrible.
the guy's fine. He's going to recover or whatnot.
Can I just say one thing? I have less than no interest in golf, but if you want a little excitement, it is really dramatic. Google the putt by this guy.
Great.
Yeah,
it's
real,
awesome.
and the excitement,
and
the two golfers hug each other. He hugs the guy that had never won.
Young guys.
It's great.
Wasn't
really
it their first or second overtime hole too?
Fourth playoff hole.
And then so all this jubilation, and then this guy gets tackled.
It looks like like a national. It looks like a national championship. Like all of the fans like rush onto the green and they lift. It was awesome. It was really great.
They were very excited. Yeah. So I don't know anything about soccer, but do we want to do the Athletic? Or do we
Well, you know who Messi is.
I do. I've heard of him.
He's coming to the MSL, right?
MLS.
MLS. Sorry.
So how big of a deal is that? He's a huge international star.
He's the best player in the world, Lionel Messi.
They just won the World Cup,
if
right?
If you're not in the yes.
Yeah,
yes,
they did.
yes. Argentina. Yes. Sorry.
Yep.
If you're not I was thinking of the other big one.
Ronaldo.
Yes, Ronaldo. Thank you. Thinking of the Brazilian. If you're not a soccer fan, you would at least know the name. Clearly, I don't.
Yep.
I forget what country he's from, but he is like the biggest star in soccer. So much so that when Inter Miami signed him to an MLS, so he did have other options. He really wanted to go back to Barcelona. So he had played in, I guess, whatever the Spanish league is. It might be La Liga, or that might be Italian. Whatever. It doesn't matter. He played there for a long time. That's where he really made a name for himself, but they're in financial trouble, so he can't go back there. Saudi Arabia offered him like $600 or $700 million to come play in the Saudi league. He turned it down, and instead he came to play for David Beckham, who is an owner of Inter Miami, and so now he's coming to the MLS. Now he's 33 years old. He's on the back end of his career. It's probably not going to change all that much in terms of but I think that Inter Miami's already sold out all of their home and away games, I think for the next 2 seasons. And I believe he'll play his first game in the beginning of July. But this to me is the craziest thing. So when they signed Messi, before they signed Messi, they had 1 million followers on Instagram. Within a couple of hours of signing Messi, they had 5.4. Then they had 6. I think they're up to like 6 or 7 million. Like people just love Messi. He's a worldwide superstar. I did find it interesting though. The Athletic put out a corresponding article about this. Some of the best players in soccer who come to the United States won't play on turf. They will only play on grass.
Does Gillette have turf?
I think Gillette has turf. I think they have that. Like most stadiums do, because Julian Edelman has been complaining about how it causes all these injuries. A lot of players have been complaining about the NFL.
And there's also supposedly bad carcinogens in some of this
it's
stuff
like I don't understand it. I mean, there's grass in Green Bay. If you can go grass at Lambeau Field, you can go grow grass.
By the way,
anywhere.
we only have 45 seconds left. Speaking of the Athletic, which is fabulous, bought by the New York Times, and I think does great reporting. They're laying off 4% of their journalists.
20. I think it turns out to be 20 people. A friend of mine who works with the Athletic says they think it's 7 baseball writers, which sort of just I think speaks to, where the popularity is right now of that sport. But also, it's a very expensive sport to cover because you have to go to spring training for so long. You're traveling all the time, and so. If you have, my guess is, and I don't know exactly who was let go. I don't know the names have come out yet. But sometimes a lot of teams have 2, sometimes 3 writers. My guess is that they just sort of trimmed some of those beats down. But it just, again, it speaks to the difficult nature right now of being in any kind of journalism.
I know that.
I just heard a story this morning on national NPR about the dearth of local news reporting and how all of these things are going unchecked in local communities because these big conglomerates are coming in and taking over.
We've been speaking with Trenny Casey.
Good to
Thank
see
you
you,
very
Trenny.
much,
Thanks,
Trenny.
guys.
She's an anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston and the Boston Public Radio contributor. Coming up, Ibram X. Kendi, director of Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research, is up.
More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. GBH celebrates LGBTQ+ Pride Month with content highlighting the community and the great diversity that strengthens our country. Stream impactful films and learn more at gbh.org/pride.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Activist, professor, author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi, is out with Stamped from the Beginning, a graphic history of racist ideas.
7 GBH.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Former President Donald Trump spending the eve of his 77th birthday preparing to go to federal court in Miami. This afternoon, he's making an initial appearance since he was indicted on a series of criminal charges that he unlawfully retained highly sensitive documents after he left office and resisted the Justice Department's request to turn over every one of those documents. Trump's the first former president to face federal criminal charges. NPR's Carrie Johnson has more.
Trump faces 37 felony charges, including obstruction and willful retention of defense secrets for allegedly keeping military plans and nuclear information in boxes unsecured at his Florida resort. The former president says he's an innocent man. Trump will likely be processed like any other criminal defendant. He may be asked to offer a plea and to provide fingerprints and other information. Special counsel Jack Smith says he'll ask for a speedy trial. But Trump's team may decide to file pretrial motions that could push the case well into 2024. Carrie Johnson, NPR News, Washington.
Russian authorities report at least 17 people have died from flooding in the wake of a burst dam in occupied southern Ukraine. But NPR's Charles Maines reports the complete death toll from the flooding remains unclear still, even as the waters continue to recede.
The Russian-backed authorities say waters have now completely left the settlement closest to the dam, where at least 5 people were reported dead last week, but that more bodies were discovered in 2 smaller towns further to the south. Russia's emergencies ministry says it has evacuated over 7,000 people since the Kakhovka Dam's walls were breached a week ago, sending a massive water flow down the Dnipro River and flooding settlements on both the occupied eastern bank as well as portions of the Ukrainian-controlled west. Yet the United Nations says Russia has refused to provide security guarantees to a UN rescue mission, stalling humanitarian assistance to occupied areas. Russia and Ukraine continue to trade blame over who caused the destruction, just as each accuses the other of firing on civilians amid evacuation efforts. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Inflation's still easing. The Consumer Price Index, tracking prices for various goods and services in this country, shows annual inflation fell from 4.9% in April to 4% in May. NPR's Scott Horsley has details.
Rising rents and used car prices were some of the biggest drivers of inflation last month, but that was partially offset by falling prices elsewhere. Gasoline prices were down, even as demand for gas has been on the rise. And eggs, which were the poster child for soaring supermarket inflation, have come back to earth now that laying flocks are recovering from that severe outbreak of avian flu. In fact, egg prices dropped nearly 14% last month. That's the biggest decrease since 1951.
NPR's Scott Horsley. The Federal Reserve's meeting this week and is widely expected to hit the pause button on the series of interest rate hikes it had been pushing. This is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The trial for the leader of the NSC 131 local neo-Nazi group begins today. According to the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, 24-year-old Christopher Hood is accused of assaulting a person outside a Boston drag queen event last summer. Hood is the leader of the Massachusetts chapter of the NSC 131. His trial is at the West Roxbury District Courthouse. Police say Hood was with about 15 to 20 members of his gang outside a drag queen story hour in JP on July 23rd last year, and that's when he allegedly attacked a person. Court records show that he will act as his own attorney. Brockton Public Schools will lay off 130 teachers and staff. GBH Radio's Diana Dami reports that parents are concerned about the cutback's effect on classroom learning. Not hearing. Okay. And we will get back to that cut in the next cast. In sports, the Red Sox and Rockies are back at it again tonight at Fenway. Congrats to the Denver Nuggets for being this year's NBA champs. And in the forecast, we should see some sun this afternoon. High today, mid-70s, cloudy, low 50s tomorrow. More showers possible tomorrow, high near 80 degrees. And then partly sunny, low 80s on Thursday. Right now, it is 69 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fidelity Investments. A dedicated advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. More at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library as we do every Tuesday and every Friday, and we are streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there. Friday, noon to 1, we'll be back at the library, and the governor will be joining us in person for an hour of Ask the Governor. And later in the show, we will cover the 3 o'clock arraignment of the two-time impeached, two-time indicted, 24 times credibly accused of sexual misconduct, Donald Trump. We're joined now, though, on Zoom by Ibram X. Kendi, director of Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research, and cartoonist illustrator Joel Christian Gill, founding director and instructor at BU's MFA program in visual narrative. Together, they've published a new graphic adaptation of Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning. Gentlemen, congratulations and welcome. It's good to see you both.
Thank
you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for doing this. So let's start with you, Ibram X. Kendi. Why did you do this? It's a very unusual and original idea. Tell us why you did it this way.
I'm just very serious about figuring out new ways to ensure that every single person has access to this important and indeed heavy history of racist ideas, particularly anti-Black racist ideas, because they're so prevalent and so impactful still to this day. And certainly there are many people who would read a 500-plus page book, but potentially there may be even more people who would read a comic book, a graphic novel that shares a similar history. And so that's, to me, to make it more accessible to as many younger and older readers as possible.
Hey, Ibram X. Kendi, in the spirit of full disclosure, a spirit I embrace as rarely as possible, I'm one of those people. I am embarrassed to say I did not read your 500-page book. I am thrilled to say I read every panel of this brilliant graphic adaptation of your book, and I'm not a teenager, so if your goal was to make it more accessible, it was a huge triumph by you and your colleague. You know, speaking of your colleague, if we could turn to you for a minute, Joel Christian Gill, I didn't know how to react when I first opened the book, and there's humor almost right away when we're talking about a graphic history of racist ideas in America. Was there some trepidation on your part about interweaving humor into maybe the most serious, painful topic in our history?
No, not at all. When the best example I can give for this is when I first read 12 Years a Slave multiple years ago, it was hard for me to get through it. I had to put it down a couple of times in order to get to the process, get through the book. And so that's not what I wanted people to do when reading this book. I wanted people to continue to read past that. So, and you know, this is a really heavy topic. So, you know, you want people to be able to laugh, either laugh, haha, or laugh, you know, not funny sort of a thing. And so that was my goal in writing the jokes that go throughout this book, is to keep people moving through the story without feeling that significant weight. So it's giving the information and also giving it in a way in which people can hear it.
Can I just give people one sample of this, if I may? There's a graphic of Martin Luther King speaking at the March on Washington. Here's what King has to say, courtesy of Joel Christian Gill. I have a dream that one day those folks that called me a troublemaker will pretend that they always supported me. And I have a dream that one day conservative politicians all across this great land will misquote me in order to win a political argument. I have a dream that white girls will tweet out that Black Lives Matter on my birthday and change their profile pictures to images of me, but will not do anything for our cause, but everything for the gram. I said that. I have a dream. I don't think Reverend King said exactly that, Joel Christian Gill, but that's the spirit I think you captured there quite well, no?
I think that if Dr. King were alive today, that was exactly the speech.
Well, that's what I was trying to say before. I think this is why this is such a success, because it's a heavy topic. If you're a blue-eyed white person, you feel really guilty about all this stuff. When you have a little levity in there, you feel... it just makes it really readable, and the drawing is absolutely fantastic. I mean,
I will say one thing though, I think it's really important for me to point out.
What?
I don't, as Black people and as Black intellectuals and people who spend this time thinking about this thing, I don't want white people to feel guilty. I want them to be as angry as I am about these things, so that we can move forward. So don't think about it as being like a situation in which you need to feel guilty. Think about turn that guilt into anger and help us fix these problems.
Well, that's a very good point. I'm working on my guilt in therapy about every aspect of my life, so I'll try to work about it in this aspect too. But tell us about Ibram X. Kendi. Tell us about how you done this with the figures that you focused in on.
Well, in many ways, the reason why even a graphic novel can be a better medium to share this history is because this history was largely a debate between racist and anti-racist ideas. And so being able to sort of show that dialogue through a graphic novel, through comics, to show that debate was, I think, incredibly important. And at the center of these debates were the five characters that really the book highlights. And so we wanted to really highlight specific people who were really at the center of these debates between racist and anti-racist ideas.
But some of the people you highlight, Ibram X. Kendi, and I'm sure this is in the 500-pager that I didn't read, but I'm going to try to get to now, frankly, out of the same emotion that Marjorie described a minute ago. A lot of the people that I naively assumed were, you don't use this word, but I'll use it, sort of pure on issues of anti-racism, were not so pure at all. People like Abraham Lincoln, people like William Lloyd Garrison from the abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator. Can you pick one of them and tell us where they too were as flawed as all the rest of us in some ways?
Well, this is one of the reasons why it's a book of ideas, right? We as human beings, our ideas, our minds are deeply complex and oftentimes contradictory. And so you had many white abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison, who on the one hand articulated anti-racist ideas that slavery is wrong and should not last another hour, and called for immediate emancipation, which was a very radical idea at the time. But some of those abolitionists also made the case that slavery was so horrific and brutal that it had literally made Black people into brutes, that Black people were subhuman, that Black people at the eve of the Civil War were not ready for their civil and voting rights and needed to be civilized first. These were the ideas of some abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison.
And Lincoln.
And Lincoln.
And more contemporaneously, Barack Obama.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we also wanted to highlight segregationist and assimilationist ideas. Mm-hmm. And so segregationist ideas have historically sort of described Black people as genetically and permanently inferior, while assimilationist ideas are all those ideas that are said by even many Black leaders that there's something behaviorally or culturally wrong with Black people, that Black people need to work harder, that there's something wrong with Black people. And those ideas are so pervasive and pernicious that even intellectuals and politicians that we love have expressed them too.
Did Barack Obama express that?
Yeah, he one of the ideas that he expressed in his famous race speech in 2008 was this idea that one of the causes of disparities was that Black people were hopeless. And this was an old idea. Enslavers, I should say, white abolitionists, I mentioned that white abolitionists imagined that slavery had imbruted Black people. Similarly, more recently, you've had all sorts of intellectuals who've said that poverty or segregation or racism have made Black people inferior by sapping their hope.
Yeah.
And there's just no evidence that supports that.
That's the voice of Ibram X. I'm sorry, Ibram X. Kendi. It's called Stamped from the Beginning, a Graphic History of Racist Ideas in America, adapted and illustrated by Joel Christian Gill. You know, Joel, if I could ask you get back to the accessibility issue. Whenever I'm lucky enough to find something like this, I worry that the people who will read it are people who, comparatively speaking, need it least. I'm not saying we all don't need the education and the filling in blanks, but Marjorie and I talk a lot about how weak we are on the history of this country, particularly Black history. Do you subscribe to the notion, I guess I was intimating at the top of this, that this kind of format has the ability to have broader reach than, let's say, more traditional histories on similar topics?
Yeah, I think so. I think comics have a sneaky way of teaching people, and getting this idea out to as many people. Reading this book for me, probably the 100 times that I've read it, the 500-page book, so reading that actually changed my mind about some things.
Like what?
It may, coming to the understanding about the history of racist ideas and how even the people that we typically, like you were talking about previously, about like the people who I thought were pure and had very racist ideas, like people that I would have heralded as good examples of what you should be, like Eleanor Roosevelt in her Black cabinet, and how she made some racist comments about how Black people were so graceful and that this is what these people do. Or the fact that Theodore Roosevelt changed the name of the White House as a response to, and he was somebody who I would have considered like he was very progressive. Well, actually people call them progressives because of that. And so like the idea that we all harbor these racist ideas is not any indictment of an individual. It's more of an indictment of a society that has shown us these racist ideas over the past couple of 100 years. And so like more people that will read this, their minds will be changed as well. Because even people as recently that we think of as icons right now have said the very, very racist ideas that basically indicate that Black people are somehow inferior because of what's happened to us.
Joel Christian Gill, staying with the thing that you and I just started talking about, is there evidence or is it just hope that this does make difficult subject matter, this format makes it more accessible? Do you have evidence in your work or the work of others?
Absolutely. I live in New Hampshire, and if you've ever been to New Hampshire, you know that when I leave the state, I significantly decrease the Black population by just leaving the state.
Yes, you do.
And when one of my first books came out, Tales of the Talented, it was about Bass Reeves. The school asked me to come down and speak to the kids, and I'm one of 3 Black people. My children are biracial, but they were the only people of color. My son was the only person of color in that class. And so I talked to this class of students and told them that this is Black history, this is our history, this is an American history, these things only happen here, and that by embracing this, we embrace a more fuller version of history. And after that, these teacher had the students write me back letters. And one of these little white boys in the class he said to me, "Thank you for teaching us about our Black history." Wow. That is how comics help.
Wow.
So,
by the way, while Marjorie's asking a question, I'm going to hold up the book so people who are watching on YouTube can see what the cover looks like.
The book is stamped from the beginning, a graphic history of racist ideas in America, Ibram X. Kendi, and illustrated by Joel Christian Gill. One of the stories, I think it was in the Washington Post, the headlines on a story about the book was called "The Racism of Good Intentions," and it talked about the unwitting racism of the well-meaning. You've been talking about this a little bit, but elaborate on that idea for people that are listening. What does that mean? Either Ibram or Joel, either one of you.
Well, first, let me just add to the last question. Another point of evidence that these books work is that they're being banned. They're being taken out of the hands of people because they work. But to your question, one of the theories that I try to document that largely has existed in the minds of people who have been historically identified as progressive or even liberal or even like radical has been what I call the oppression inferiority thesis. It's this idea that oppressive conditions are leading to deficient behaviors among Black people. So you have people who recognize racism, segregation, slavery as oppressive, as wrong, and are challenging them, but they've also taught themselves or expressed this notion that the conditions themselves are also leading to these deficiencies among Black people. And so at the same time, they're well-intentioned. I'm trying to free Black people or work with Black people. At the very same time, they're imagining that Black people themselves are deficient.
And is that where this whole idea of the white savior that you see in books and movies comes into play?
It is.
Yeah.
And
it's all over the place. I mean, I think of the movies that you see, that I've seen in my life, so many of them. That's the whole theme. There's a great white person that goes and rescues the Black person from whatever it is that's happening to the Black person. That, even in the help, that thing about the housekeepers. Sure. I mean, it was the same thing going on there.
And one of the major distinctions between a white segregationist and a white assimilationist is a white segregationist does not believe Black people can be saved. And white assimilationists are like, no, they can be developed, they can be civilized, they can be saved. While anti-racist white Americans and others are like, they don't need saving, they're already equal. What they need is help challenging these conditions and these policies.
Ibram X. Kendi, knowing of you and knowing you a little bit through the recent years, it seems you can do virtually anything. I'm shocked that you can't draw. What is that about? I mean, you couldn't illustrate this damn thing yourself? What'd you need your buddy to do this for?
I mean, I can draw, but you're not going to want to read my or look at my drawings.
Hey, Joel Christian Gill, so he turns to you, his colleague over there at B. By the way, before I ask you the next question, Joel Christian Gill, could you, I introduced you as the founding director of BU's MFA program in visual narrative. What does that mean? What is that program?
Visual narrative is what you have to call comics at a Research One institution. It's just a fancy way of saying comics. So I just teach students. I teach grad students how to make comics.
Okay, so what's the relationship with? I mean, obviously this thing won awards. I think it was in 2016, the 500-page version, as we're all calling it now. What was the process like between you and Ibram X. Kendi that ended up in this terrific piece of work?
Mostly it was Dr. Kendi gave me a list, gave me a highlighted PDF. And so what I did was I took that highlighted PDF and I put it in a form. All the highlights I put in was like a sort of like section. And then I made the connections between that by reading extra things in the text or pulling in some extra stuff. From, like, for example, in the beginning where I have Jefferson Davis giving his famous stamp from the beginning speech. I don't think Dr. Kendi had quoted the entire speech, and I actually added more to it. I went and read the entire speech and added more to it. So those kind of things, like adding a little bit of things here. There was a section in there about Davis Bend, where Dr. Kendi just mentioned Davis Bend, and I added a little bit more to it because I thought Davis Bend was owned by Jefferson Davis's, was a plantation or a forced labor camp. Plantation sounds way too genteel. It's a forced labor camp that Jefferson Davis's brother owned. And they had this really egalitarian way in which to treat their enslaved Africans, their captives. And so I just wanted to add a little bit more into that story, just to give you a little bit more of a sense of how, like, the people and what they were doing and how they were able to run these things that were opposite of what people had said about Black people could do.
It's beautifully told. Staying with you for a second, you told Marjorie not to be guilt-ridden before. I have the same feelings that she does. Do you find yourself in the land of impurity like so many of these characters, historical characters that you and Ibram X. Kendi portray?
100%. And I think that is a function of of how we are inundated with images and ideas in society. I often tell the story of being on a plane and listening to, 1990s conscious hip hop, which, when I was a kid, that was like, that was the thing, right? This is the way in which we need to be. And then listening to this song, specifically a song by Goody Mob. I won't go into specifics about it, but it was basically like, it's not about who you are, it's about how you act, which is it's definitely the idea is about it's not about how we act, because we can't act our way out of things that people irrationally believe. And so I think that, that coupled with the idea that we all hold these ideas is, it's a description. Racism and racist ideas are a description of something. It's not it's not embedded in who we are. Just like whiteness is not a thing that you need to pick up as a mantle. I always say that if you pick up the mantle of whiteness, then you are taking on white supremacy. You can leave that down and just be a person who happens to be white as a person who is white. Because that mantle is what is embedded in that, which is the white supremacist ideal, which is direct opposite of what blackness is, which is not that. Blackness was not even created to subjugate people.
Ibram X. Kendi, same question for you. Have you found in your work through the years the same, some of the same kinds of flaws that you've written about and Joel Christian Gill portrays in pictures and the Lincolns and the Garrisons of the world?
Indeed, I have. And I think that was one of the animating features of How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I think that's possibly one of the reasons why people of all racial backgrounds gravitated, to that book, because I wasn't essentially saying to Black people or saying to non-Black people, speaking to them from on high. I was speaking to them about my own experience, how I learned these anti-Black racist ideas, how I've been able to sort of begin to unlearn them and learn more anti-racist ideas.
You mentioned, Ibram X. Kendi, that some of your books have been banned. Tell people what's going on with your books,
including this.
Yeah, I've had 7 different books last I checked that have been banned, and certainly one of the reasons why my books are being banned is because my books obviously I'm a Black author, and these books deal with race and racism, and many authors of color, particularly whose books talk about racism, are being banned, just like many authors or characters who are LGBTQ, are being banned as well. And part of this, again, to underline it, the reason why our books are being banned is because they're so effective, right? It's just like 200 years ago when enslavers were banning abolitionist books in the South because they knew they could, with white and even Black people, allow them to see the brutality and the evil of slavery.
Have you heard from people in these different states or towns where these books have been banned? Have you gotten feedback from people, particularly kids?
So the kids, obviously the kids and young people more broadly are serious about being told the truth, the unvarnished truth. They want to understand the world that they're living in. And so for the most part, young people have been excited about these books. And, what's ironic is many of these books are being banned on this premise that they somehow make white children uncomfortable or feel bad or guilty. When you have white children who are learning about people who are anti-racist, who happen to be white, to use Joel's term, who challenged slavery, who challenged Jim Crow. So they're not feeling bad learning about white abolitionists. Now, they're certainly feeling like, okay, I'm not going to articulate those racist ideas that those white abolitionists expressed. So they're learning and seeing themselves even in an anti-racist history.
So Ibram X. Kendi, if Marjorie and I commit to read the 500-page version without pictures, will you commit to come back and talk to us?
Yes.
There's a little hesitation there, but we'll take that
and we should say,
as a yes.
We should say before you go, I mean, this is sweeping. You start out with Cotton Mather and then come up to the 60s with Angela Davis. I mean, you go right through a current of, I mean, this is...
And a Barack Obama. I mean,
the history of our country.
There's even an image of Lauren Boebert in there. That's how precise it gets. Gentlemen, congratulations. This thing is fabulous, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both very much.
you.
Congratulations.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you for being with us. You've been speaking with Ibram X. Kendi, Director of Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research and founding director and instructor at BU's MFA program in visual narrative, Joel Christian Gill. Together they've published this graphic history of racist ideas in America. And I can't say it's a fun book. It's about a very serious subject, but the way it's done makes it, I guess, very, very informative and entertaining. Would you not
it
say?
Is. I mean, it's a weird word to use, but it is. It's great. It's really
the book,
great.
again, is stamped from the beginning. Well, we're always stunned by how much we don't know. Anyway, coming up, you know this guy from This Old House. His latest show follows the inspiring and tear-jerking work of Team Rubicon, a crew of veterans and other volunteers who help communities bounce back from natural disasters. This Old House guy, Kevin O'Connor, is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
A UMass Lowell student-athlete alleges racist behavior by the school's head baseball coach.
Nobody else has treated me the way he's treated me.
Feeling powerless, he starts keeping a diary of the incidents.
There's nobody I can talk to fix things, change things, so I decided the best thing to do is just write to myself.
And because of it, he says he was dismissed from the team. From the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting, I'm Philip Martin. Cedric's Diary, this afternoon on GBH's All Things Considered.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business by offering cybersecurity, internet, and mobile solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. Comcast Business, internet required. And Prince Lobel, a full-service law firm anchored in Boston, committed to working hand in hand to provide a wide range of services on matters of local, regional, national, and international reach. PrinceLobel.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at Facebook.com/GBH News, YouTube.com/GBH News. Friday, the governor is here for an hour, noon to 1, to take our questions and yours. We're joined now at the BPL by Kevin O'Connor. You know him from his work on PBS's This Old House, the original home improvement show born right here at GBH, show known for its useful home improvement tips, friendly faces, and gorgeous home renovations, and answering Marjorie's questions about ice dams. But his latest venture is something entirely different. From the producers of This Old House is Roku's Team Rubicon. It follows the inspirational stories of the mostly veteran-led volunteer group of the same name. Best advice for anybody tuning in, bring the tissues.
I don't even know why I cry at this all the time. I feel like such a punk.
When I was 17 years old, I wanted to save the world. Now I'm 43 years old, and I'm finally saving the world. One homeowner at a time, one family at a time.
I put this on. It means I'm coming. When I put this shirt on, it means I'm coming out, and I'm bringing gray shirts with me.
Wow. These are members of Team Rubicon reflecting on their time with the organization, helping others, and in turn, clearly helping themselves. You can stream episodes of Team Rubicon for free on RokuChannel.com. Kevin O'Connor, TV host and gray shirt himself. It is great to see you, Kevin. Welcome.
Yeah.
Good to see you again,
Yeah,
Marjorie.
thank you so much for coming in. So before
Pleasure.
you elaborate on this whole thing, we're going to play one more piece of sound from the guy who co-founded this, former Marine Jake Wood. We were just talking about him.
Yeah.
Devastatingly handsome, I think is how we described
Boy,
him.
is he. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And 6'6", so maybe he plays basketball as well. I don't know. But here's some sound from episode 1 from this former Marine Jake Wood talking about the group's creation in the wake of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti.
I'm watching this disaster unfold and feel an urge to help. I'm drawing parallels between what I'm seeing on the ground and the experiences that I had in Iraq and Afghanistan, I looked at my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I said, I think I should go down there. And so I started calling Marines that I'd served with, and we ended up getting a team together. There were the 4 of us, 3 veterans and a firefighter. The mentality was, let's get down there, help as many people as we can for as long as we can, and then come home intact.
And that was the very beginning, but since then it's grown enormously. So tell us what this Team Rubicon does.
Well, you heard it from Jake specifically. He felt compelled to help. So think about this. He is released from the Marines. He's been a combat veteran. He's highly trained. He's incredibly efficient. And he needs to find a way to be impactful. So what does he do? And so they find a place where they can deliver the need, which in this case was Haiti after the earthquake. But they take that idea from 4 of them crossing the border into Haiti, helping there, and grow it into a national organization. It's now 170,000 volunteers strong. And they find that there are people out there who want to be impactful. They want to have a role. It's different than their desk job or once they've been out of the armed services. And so they've come up with ways to gather these people together, to train them and deploy them all across the country. A natural storm happens, a disaster happens, people are affected, Team Rubicon deploys volunteers, and they get to work.
Yeah, and one of them talks about this as kind of a therapy for a lot of survivors of combat, where obviously that is horrible.
I worked next to an Army veteran, Dean Wagner. He and I got kind of close while we were filming this. The thing that he said that stuck out to me was when he was in Iraq, he rode atop a Humvee in his uniform behind a large gun doing his job, and he said, everyone looked at me like I was evil. Now he's with Team Rubicon.
Stop. Here he is in his own words saying now he's here with Team Rubicon. I was evil in Iraq, or at least perceived that way. And here he is describing what life is like with Team Rubicon.
People coming up to me in tears and just in gratitude and hugging me and calling me an angel. I'd never been called an angel my whole life. And it really got to me, and it changed my perspective. I began to think, all right, maybe I'm not this bad. Maybe I can bring something to this world that's positive.
You know, the main takeaway, I only watched episode 1 so far, Kevin, is what it does. I don't mean to minimize in any way the colossal stuff, we'll talk about that in a minute, it does for the people who are devastated by these natural disasters. But there's so much of a focus what it does for these human beings, men and women, who decide to go help other men and women.
I think you heard it in the first sound up, those people getting choked up. Those were grown men and some women, and they were veterans, and they're breaking down crying because they were given the opportunity to continue to serve. And I had that same experience. I mean, on This Old House, the only time I cry is when, Margie says, oh, I got another ice dam or something like that.
But this show is like This Old House on steroids. Well, I mean, it really is.
It is, but it's also about that sort of human need to help each other out. And you show up next to someone who you have just met. So they're a complete stranger, and they're working side by side with you on a roof behind a chainsaw for another complete stranger who has had their worst day. And at the end of the day, that person is saying, you saved my life, thank you.
Tell us about the woman who lives, I can't pronounce it, the little island with 800 people. She lived there, and tell her, what's her name, begins with an M?
Mona.
Mona, tell us about Mona.
She's lived there her entire life. Her family lived there. The storm is coming. They don't think they're going to need to get out. It's
Matlacha.
Matlacha is the little island, correct, yes. Yeah. You can only get there over a bridge. And so the storm turns. It hits Fort Lauderdale. Matlacha gets the storm surge. She gets 6 to 8 feet of water where she's never had water before. The house is destroyed. Nobody's there to help. She's living in the car. With a six-pack and a sidearm and a dog.
Right, she says 2 guns, she tells
It's
you.
Florida.
She does say that. It's a great line.
And she's stuck. I mean, the entire place has been wiped out. Thousands of homes have been destroyed. There's not enough emergency responders. And then, weeks into it, Team Rubicon shows up. Some women who are Team Rubicon gray shirts and mostly veterans, and they're the first people that she's come into contact with to help her clean the house, get her back in it, get it secured so she has a place to live that isn't her car. That's transformational.
Well, also the footage you've got, in Houston, the hurricane in Houston and Sandy and Haiti. I mean, you just see the complete and utter devastation, and then you see all these people with the gray shirts, which is their symbol, right? They wear the gray shirt with Team Rubicon on it, coming in mass. and working in large groups and doing incredible amounts of rebuilding in a very short time.
They described it, the best way I've heard it described was what Team Rubicon has done is created a standing national volunteer fire department. There are gray shirts all throughout the country, in your neighborhood, in your community, who have been trained and are committed to come out in an emergency to help you out and do it completely for free and to volunteer. And that's a powerful idea, National Service Volunteer Fire Department.
That's the voice of Kevin O'Connor from This Old House and now Team Rubicon. So you also include the story of some guy who used to be a banker, I think, in Massachusetts or New England, who gets in a car, bids his wife and kids farewell, and starts on a drive down, I guess, to Florida to help. Describe that guy if you can.
Well, that's me. You know, they asked me to do the show, and they said, we're going to need you to, we're going to need you to work alongside them. And I said back to them, I'm only going to do it if I can actually become a gray shirt.
And you did.
I went through the training. I took all the classes. I embedded with them. We deployed. I slept on cots and floors, and we ate whatever food we could get at the gas station until, the supplies showed up. And it was the hardest show to make, and also the most gratifying. Like, you cannot get up excited in the morning when 30 people from all over the country are sleeping on those cots and those gym floors with you. I'll tell you one quick story. We had burritos for dinner the night before the California State Fair because the kitchen wasn't set up yet. We did take out. And then the next morning we woke up at 5:30, 6 o'clock is wake up chow, and there are burritos laid out on the table. And we're like, oh, it's breakfast, I guess. And there weren't enough for all of us, so we just kind of cut them in half and ate them. Then we had morning meeting, and the person in charge of operations says, guys, I'm sorry. We didn't know this, because I'm sorry that breakfast didn't show up. We should have fed you, but the delivery guy went to the wrong place. There's a homeless shelter next to us. They got the food. And every hungry, tired gray shirt, 50 of them, broke out in applause because somebody else got their breakfast. That's who you're next to, and that gets you fired up to get out there.
And by the way, didn't I read somewhere, not just you, but your team? I mean, your whole thing slept on these cots and essentially embedded in this whole thing, right?
5 or 6 of us, camera guys, sound guys, a couple guys flying the drones, all on the cots, all tucked into these little corners, working and embedded.
By the way, and when your first job, I don't know if it was your first job, you didn't do what you do brilliantly on your show, on your other show with your odd colleagues on This Old House.
Odd colleagues.
Well, they are. There's some very odd.
We got a couple odd ones at their room.
But what were you called? A swamper? What the hell were you? What were you?
On my first Team Rubicon deployment, I was a swamper. So
Can you explain what that is?
The chainsaw guys have to be trained. They're big, dangerous saws. There's trees hanging, widow makers coming down. So they have to be trained, and you can't get within 5 or 6 feet of them, right? So imagine a saw going around could cut you in half. So they cut, and then guys like me or swampers are allowed to come in and grab the cuts, pull it out, throw it to the curb, put it in a truck, and it's just brutal manual labor, 8 hours in the Florida sun. And I loved it. I mean,
Did you really like it, or do you have to like it?
No, I loved it. I worked with a guy, and he said, listen, there are people who like to work, and then there are people who like to let people work. And that was all he said. And I think he's right. I enjoyed it. I mean, I was able to just turn my mind off, get something done, and at the end of the day, there was a big pile of debris over there, and a gentleman's house who'd been covered in trees and was inaccessible was now cleared. He was elderly, and he had a path to sort of moving forward.
That's great.
A couple of things that struck me is it seemed like a lot of these guys had got a lot, and women had gotten a lot of training in the military, and they kind of felt as though they had all this training, and now they're back doing some desk job or something, because it did seem that training was part of what made them so effective.
I think it is. I have heard the story enough. I'm not a vet. I didn't serve, so I can only surmise. I think it is difficult when you grow up in a culture of being highly competent, very well trained, asked to serve and do something every day, and then that stops like a brick wall. Then all of a sudden you're put back out there, and you're kind of, and people said this. Jen, who you heard early on, she said, I got lost. I didn't know I was lost, but I didn't know where my people were, and I didn't know how I could get back into that level of service and commitment. And so this is one way that those veterans, it's not all veterans, but this is one way that those veterans can get back into it, and they can do what they've been trained so well to do.
And the other thing I thought, we're such a divided country. I would imagine that there's some camaraderie between people that might be on different sides of the political divide, because you're not arguing about politics. You're doing something, you have a unified purpose.
We wake up in the morning, we go to survivors' homes, we work for them, they hug us at the end of the day. We then have a campfire amongst our fellow gray shirts. I had no idea when I was working next to people who was a vet and who was a civilian.
Yeah.
I had no idea who was blue, I had no idea who was red. I never knew.
Wow.
We never talked about it. It didn't matter. And I knew there was a diverse crowd. I mean, I just knew it. But everybody looked great at me. And that was just a great thing. It was so not divisive, and it was so reassuring to see. There's somebody pushing a message to the wrong people. This is the message. I don't think we're so divided. When I go out there, I didn't see it at all. There's a lot of hugs and a lot of people helping out.
Great.
By the way, of 175,000 volunteers, which is beyond huge, 70% are estimated to be vets, and the other 30% what are called kick-ass civilians like you. You know, on an unrelated topic, and then I'm hoping, I only saw episode 1, so I'm hoping you'll describe what is to come in the following 12 roughly half hours each. I am a huge believer, I know this is oxymoronic, in mandatory volunteerism for like high school graduates. We've discussed this on the show repeatedly. One of the ways to bridge the gap, one of the ways to have a kid who lives in Cambridge to learn what life is like in Alabama, you know the end of the thing, is to do this kind of thing. Do you think this kind of thing would help bridge the unbridgeable, horrible divide in this country?
1,000%.
Do you really?
I absolutely do, Jim. I've thought about it a lot. I had a little bit of that sentiment that you had before going into this. I think about sort of the Israeli system and national service and all of that. Two things happen. I think when these people go into the military, they get some of that, but I think it's not widespread enough. So I think this is exactly the type of thing, whether it's this or something similar. Working next to your neighbor to support your fellow American neighbors, it changes you and it opens up your perspective, and I think it just makes us all better.
Why hadn't I heard of something this big before the show?
They call it the largest volunteer organization you never heard of.
Well,
yeah, exactly. I never heard of it either.
You heard of it now.
So I'm wondering how, with some practicalities, what do they take a week's vacation from their jobs, or how do they work this out?
You can do weekends locally. You can deploy for a week if they put you on a plane. You find time. Sometimes employers more than support this activity, and they give people paid time off to do it. It completely depends on the individual. I work with a lot of people who turned their vacations into service.
That's incredible.
And they were just like, listen, I don't play golf. Or my wife was doing one thing, I was doing another thing. This is something we could do together. I brought my son because I met a father and son civilian team who decided he deployed, the dad, and then the son deployed, and they said, let's do it together. So,
are some of these women the wives and girlfriends of the vets?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what I figured.
I met a couple married couples. They don't let them deploy together. They deploy separately.
Oh, really?
Okay. The civilians can. The military, the vets, typically are in different deployments.
Is there a lot of deploying together, so to speak, at these nightly campfires? That's all I could think
I was
of.
with my crew.
Kevin's turning a little red here for those not watching on YouTube or Facebook. So can you just go? Do you mind if what's to come for me? Did you watch beyond the first episode?
I was my computer kept going from one to the next, so I think I saw like 3 or 4 of them.
Oh, well,
you will follow us around the country. We will go to Selma, Alabama to respond to the tornadoes that hit there, then Amory, Mississippi. We will head off to the West Coast, to California for the floods that happened. We were up in the mountains with the 700 inches of snow digging people out, and of course down in Florida. What you will see is a similar story told all across the corners of this country. People locally and from flying in, helping their neighbors out after every natural disaster.
Yeah,
and you'll hear these stories about veterans and civilians and the survivors who are incredibly appreciative for this amazing organization.
You know, you must have thought a lot in your other job with this old house about people getting flooded where they didn't expect it, people to be burned out in the ice. Things are obviously, climate change is changing things. So I wonder, are some of these people, are they rebuilding in a place that's going to be gone again in 4 years or 5 years or 10 years? I mean, do people talk about that?
Yeah, they
Especially
do.
like in Houston, which was so low to the water, I think actually underwater.
For better or for worse, most people rebuild exactly where they just were.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that Team Rubicon has a rebuilding program, relatively small, but they do rebuild houses. We went and saw a couple in Houston, and what they do is they rebuild in a way that the houses are more resilient.
Yeah.
And so stronger roofs. They did this in Puerto Rico. We went back down to Puerto Rico to watch the work that they had done years ago and how it held up. You know, the Team Rubicon homes still had the roofs. The other homes did not. Yeah. And so we'll cut the sheetrock back. We'll make sure that the insulation can come in and out and be clean and washed. We'll put the electrical outlets. They have a protocol to rebuild a house more resilient. The reality is, if a tornado comes through your neighborhood, there isn't a house you can build that can withstand a direct strike on a tornado. And most people don't want to relocate. Mona is back in Matlacha. She's back in the house, and if they get a storm surge, she's going to get flooded again, and she's going to have to get back in that car with her six-pack and her dog.
When she says to you that line and a couple of sidearms, and she pauses and says, "This is Florida," with a look in her face. So did you get fired by this old house? Or are you still there?
No, we're still doing it.
So did you learn anything from this experience that will translate into something for you personally? I mean, doing what you're doing?
We took some side trips. We went to the Insurance Institute, which helps them to determine how to rebuild homes properly. We watched hailstorm testing. We saw a roof that can withstand wind and rain. So I did personally learn something, and we will teach the audience ways that you can rebuild more resilient. The show is mostly about the human element, though. It's about that service component. It is about our neighbors. It's about the volunteerism. So it's not so much technically about homes, but there's a little bit of that in there because we are who we are and we can't help ourselves.
Do you think you had this in you, by the way? I don't mean the show. I mean the doing.
It's awkward to say, but yeah, I do. I like to do. That's what I do in my spare time.
And did it feel as good to you?
Oh, yeah.
I know you'll be honest, as the deans of the world and other people who you interviewed?
I wasn't chasing ghosts out of my head.
That's a good point.
I think it's a different experience for me. But I like to be busy. I don't golf when I'm at home. I work in the yard and I chase my kids around with chainsaws and say, "Let's take." So I enjoy that kind of stuff. They don't, but I do. So I really liked being around people who think the same way.
Great.
I really do. Like when you get up at 6 a.m. and everyone else is kind of jazzed up, ready to go, and they're kind of like, "Can we get to work now?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, you guys are all right."
Did you get coffee?
Oh yeah.
Oh good, that's good.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's a really feel-good thing. I mean, you're interviewing these people. They're talking about their experience. The people that own the homes, that lost the homes. I mean, it's like not a dry eye in the house kind of thing, right?
I think if people watch it, I think they're going to be inspired by their fellow Americans.
Yes, very inspired.
Not just by the volunteers who show up, but how the survivors, as we call them, how they react, how grateful they are. And I think it'll wake people up to the idea that it can happen to anybody. You meet a person who's been whacked by a hurricane or rising waters or is in a tornado, it's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. It just happened to them. They've had their worst day. I think one of our biggest fears as humans is what happens if nobody shows up.
That's right.
Most of it, we're thinking about what if no one comes to our dinner party? What if nobody comes to your house after it's been destroyed and you've got nowhere to go? What if you're Mona and you're there for 6 weeks instead of...
That's a wonderful point. So before you go, at the end of episode 1, again, I don't want you to do a spoiler because a lot of us haven't watched the next 12. They present to you, apparently much to your surprise, this little token is like the new kid who really, no, it is. I mean, the new kid who really went above and beyond. And your mission, from what I understand, when you get one of those Team Rubicon tokens, is to give it to somebody else. Do you do that in the next 12 episodes?
I do. It's called a challenge coin. It comes from a military tradition. It's a way to recognize somebody for service. They did it to me probably a little too early, but I did swamp that day for 3 or 4 chainsaw guys. So I did bust my ass. But I did take it seriously that I had to give it to somebody who I felt sort of embodied Team Rubicon, the values, worked hard, and we find that person, and if you watch, you find out who it is.
Great, Kevin.
Yeah, it's great
to see you. The show's fabulous.
It is
and really
fabulous.
Heartwarming.
So congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I almost like it as much as I like this old
You can
house.
like both. It's all right. Thank you all. Great to be back.
Kevin
Thank
O'Connor.
you very much. We've been speaking with Kevin O'Connor. He's host of the great This Old House, and now Team Rubicon. Like I said before, it is a real feel-good show. It makes you feel really good about your fellow men and women helping each other out in their most dire circumstances. The first season is available to stream at RokuChannel.com. Thank you very much, Kevin, for coming.
Good to see you, Kevin.
Coming up, live from Florida, near the courthouse.
Donald Trump has been indicted by federal prosecutors on 37 counts.
We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
Trump is expected to surrender to authorities in Miami. He has said that he will plead not guilty.
This vicious persecution is a travesty of justice.
Here are coverage of Trump's court appearance on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Village Bank. These days, we all need to feel connected. The ability to connect with your money is in your hands with the Village Bank's digital banking solutions. Village-bank.com. Member FDIC, member DIF. And Safety Insurance. Cyber coverage from Safety Insurance covers data restoration, data recreation, system restoration, and more. You can ask an independent agent about Safety Insurance. Safety Insurance. They'll help you manage life's storms, even the cyber kind.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Margery Eakin, live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Friday, it's Ask the Governor. Maura Healey will join us in person at the library 12 to 1. And I was remiss, I failed to mention before that Ibram X. Kendi and Joel Christian Gill, the people behind Stamped from the Beginning, a graphic history of racist ideas in America, will have an in-person book launch event at Somerville's Arts at the Armory. That's June 26, which I think is 2 Mondays from yesterday. It is. Information's available at thewilbur.com/armory. Again, apologies for not mentioning. Kendi and Gill at the Somerville Arts at the Armory, June 26th. Information is available at thewilbur, WILBUR.com/armory. We're joined now with a live dispatch from somewhere out there near the courthouse. As media maven and no longer a local woman, Sue O'Connell. She's the co-publisher Bay Windows and the South End News, contributor to Current on NBCLX and NECN. Sue, it's great you called in. Thanks.
Sure, glad to be here. I was actually at the beach and this bear chased me. It was really, no, that didn't happen.
There is a bear at the damn beach somewhere in Florida. We saw it.
Yeah. So I understand they discovered some suspicious device this morning and you were right on the scene. What happened? Do tell.
You know, like Jim, and I'm not really good out in the field. Okay?
Okay.
Like, I'm usually on my couch. And I was, I'm just, less than a 1/10 of a mile away from the courthouse. I got up this morning, went down to meet with people and talk with people and see what was happening. And I'm standing, I think those of us in the media know how to do this. You read the faces of the police and the law enforcement around you, and I saw them look serious and start walking in a direction. So I had my cell phone camera and I followed them. And on a pole, there was a screen, a TV screen, that had an anti-media message on it. They looked at it, they turned around and looked at it. A dog came, it was tied, it wasn't hooked up to anything, it was tied. They took the monitor down, they leaned it against the pole, the dog sniffed around it. I videotaped the whole thing. I was less than 10 feet away from it. Didn't ever occur to me that, oh my gosh, could be dangerous and I don't get paid that much. So I kept the video and walked around and realized that I was running out of space. So I deleted the video, which is also why I'm not a professional news photographer.
That is pathetic.
I go have some lunch. I go back to the courthouse, and they've just evacuated the area, and now they are looking at this screen as if it's very serious, and they take it away.
Oh, really?
It was not. There was nothing. I mean, after the fact, it's always easy to say. There was just, I think, in my opinion, an overabundance of caution.
Yep.
But as you know, Jim, Sean, the great news photographer at NECN, he asked me for the video, and I said I deleted it. And he said his job was safe and not to worry about it.
Well, by the way, if you were there and you delete it and don't have it, then I can say I was there and I videoed it too. And I apparently deleted it as well. You know, one of the concerns was that Trump, in typical fashion, was urging his followers to show up there a la January 6th. Proud Boys were allegedly leading the charge, even though everything I read this morning suggests the Proud Boys are more concerned about boycotting Bud Light than they are helping the president. And I assume people know that their leader, Enrique Tarrio, was convicted of seditious conspiracy early in May. What's the protest scene there like outside the courthouse?
It's really very weird, Jim and Marjorie. It is, there's no barricades up, really. There are just some there's tape up. Yesterday we were at the courthouse. There was virtually no protesters or any regular people or people there checking out the scene. It was all media. I spoke with a number of armed security guards who are there for a mall that's nearby. I talked to business leaders. I went into some hotels and talked to managers and said, what's your feeling around this? And they went, it's Miami. You know, we're used to President Trump being here. We're not that concerned about it. We'll see what happens and we'll adapt as we go. And then this morning I went down and I was there, the last time I was there at noon. At 10 o'clock this morning, I think I could have counted how many Trump supporters there were there. I think there were fewer than 100. Obviously, the media outnumbering them like 10 to 1, but that's expected. And not only are there, at that time, a few number of Trump supporters, it's like a festival. I mean, they're all over 60 for the most part. There aren't that very many younger Trump supporters. They are thrilled to see each other. They're hugging, they're celebrating, they're buying merchandise. Many of them are there for their, 10 minutes. They've got their Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, the whole, usual
lock them up.
Yeah, that lock them up, that whole thing that they're doing. But they're clearly kind of professional performers. I don't want to put it in another way. There's nobody there who's angry. I mean, if my guy was being unfairly, in my opinion, locked up, I would be angry. But it's almost like a celebratory festival. And again, that was an hour ago. And just as I was leaving, the police were starting to harden the area. But again, not like it was in New York. Now, mind you, as casual as this feels, the courthouse is surrounded by apartment buildings, like multi-floor, 20-floor, 30-floor apartment buildings. And they really just don't seem that concerned about securing the area. So as I left an hour ago, it was still, everybody was happy to see each other. The people were walking through the media areas. You saw police, but they weren't necessarily dressed in anything more than they would for a basketball game reaction. And so it's just odd. And I wasn't in New York for the indictment, and obviously Miami is not New York. It's a very different experience. But all of the journalists and people I've talked to who are in New York are like, this is so dramatically different than how they handled the indictment and Trump's appearance in New York.
By the way, the irony being the one in New York, most experts say, far less consequential and serious. And this, by the way, you said you were there an hour ago. AP is reporting just a few minutes ago. Jamie checked this out, Associated Press. The media still outnumbers the protesters. Talking to Sue O'Connell from Florida, where the former president will be arraigned in exactly an hour and 58 minutes.
So is there...
And Jim, I'll also say, I've been walking around. I haven't just stayed at the courthouse. So I have walked like 3 blocks around the courthouse just to see, is anyone gathering? There's nothing.
It's interesting because Juliette Kayyem has long said, she's one of our regular guests, of course, national security expert Juliette Kayyem from Harvard, has long said that the prosecutions, and in some cases very long sentences for the people for January 6th, would cause further protesters with any ideas of violence maybe to rethink things. I mean, the guy from the Oath Keepers, I think he just got 20 years, did he not? Years, and Tario from the Proud Boys got a lengthy sentence as well. So you wonder if that's what this is about, or if it's just that for whatever reason the excitement about Trump's legal problems, even among his supporters, is waning.
Well, Margie, again, the thing I'm struck most about is how they're not angry.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I agree with everything that Juliet said, and it's also going to be one of the hottest days. I think, according to meteorologists here, the hottest day so far this year.
How hot?
In Miami, it's going to be 95 or 96 or 97.
And very
again,
humid.
These people are all over 50.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. But I have been to protests for things that I cared about. I have protested for LGBTQ rights. I have protested against the government regarding their lack of response to HIV/AIDS in the 1980s. And we were really angry. We did things like, handcuffed, I didn't, but folks I was with handcuffed themselves to the Massachusetts State House gate. I mean, there was like, we are being put upon. Things are being done to us. We're being oppressed. And this is like a tailgate party or a family reunion. I just don't feel any of the anger. It's almost like they're really enjoying that Trump is going through this because it really builds the narrative and builds the cult.
By the way, you're describing almost exactly when I was in Palm Beach a couple of months ago, which was totally coincidental. I'm driving down right in front of Mar-a-Lago. Every day there were I sent pictures back, maybe 10 senior citizens, most of whom knew each other, sitting in lawn chairs with little umbrellas over them because the sun was quite hot. and doing it's almost like a social thing for retirees to keep it. Having said that, I don't want any of us,
Jim, like bingo.
I don't want any of us to delude ourselves. Look at the polls. You may have talked about them yesterday. A huge percentage of Trump's people are still with him. A huge percentage of them say that the indictments mean nothing to them. They'll have no effect. And if they have any effect, they'll have an effect that their support for him, at least in the voting booth, they say today, will be stronger. You know, Sue, one of the things we're going to talk to listeners about after we talk to you is an old topic for me and Marjorie, but something I'm obsessed with. Both the magistrate and the senior judge, and by the way, the judge, the person in charge of the courtroom today, is not Aileen Cannon, who went light on Trump early on. She's still in charge of the case, but this magistrate, Jonathan Goodman, both he and the senior judge, whose name I can't remember, for Southern Florida, have not only said no cameras, no audio, journalists may not even bring phones into the damn courtroom, which I think is an abomination. I'm not even sure it's legal, but an abomination. What's your sense? What are journalists, what are your fellow media people saying about this blackout? When, by the way, he's being prosecuted in the name of the people of the United States of America, and we're not allowed in.
So we were set up yesterday next to two journalists who were from Great Britain who were here. And, as you're standing next to each other for hours, and I made a Mary Poppins joke because every time someone asked me something, I had it because I'm a mom. Oh, you need a Band-Aid? Here you go. Ibuprofen? Here you go. And she said to me, so what's the situation for tomorrow? How do we get in? And I said, well, unless you paid somebody to sit in line for you, which media organizations did. Right. There were like folks all lined up last night in their lawn chairs making a couple $100 holding a space in line. I said, you're not going to get in. And she said, well, how are we going to share, who do I talk to share the video? And I said, there's probably not going to be any video. There might be a sketch artist, but at that point, we didn't know if you could bring cameras in or cell phones in, which we found out you can't. And she said to me, so much for the First Amendment, huh?
Well, I think that's the issue. And by the way, if people are saying, because they've heard us talk about it before, while the vast majority of state courts do allow cameras in, the vast majority of federal courts do not. However, individual judges, magistrates who have control of their courtroom are perfectly free, under whatever the federal guidelines are, to say the public interest is such that we will open this to at least audio, if not video, and at minimum, allow a journalist to live tweet what's happening in the courtroom when, for the first time in American history, a former president is charged with federal crimes. This is unbelievable.
This is just disgrace in general. We've talked about this a million times. When the Whitey Bulger trial went on in Boston, we couldn't see it. When the Tsarnaev trial went on in Boston, you couldn't see it. You had to get there and wait in line. And there's so few seats in the courtroom. If you go to the overflow courtroom, you can't really see anything because there's one camera framed at one guy. So the fact that we don't have cameras in courtrooms in the federal court in 2023 is just...
Or at least in this case.
Well, in any case, it's almost like it's disgraceful now that they have the technology to do it. But I wanted to ask you...
By the way, one of our colleagues made a very good point, who shall remain unnamed, that was Jamie, said Sue would have deleted the video anyway. So what the hell's the difference if she was allowed to bring a camera into the courtroom? An excellent point.
So I know you're in Miami and not in Palm Beach, but Kari Lake, the governor who says she didn't lose even though she lost out in Arizona.
She's not governor.
She wanted to be governor. She's supposed to be doing this Palm Beach rally, and then there was this talk of the Vice City Proud Boys.
Wait, don't leave her. She says you have to come through me.
That's right.
And we're all members of the NRA.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the implication
a violent invitation. But she's supposed to be doing some Palm Beach rally. I don't know if that's happening. And at the Miami courthouse, it's so-called Vice City Proud Boys.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
We're talking online about showing up, and then there was supposed to be the Trump document hoax rally. So I'm looking at it at CNN right now.
Nobody.
It doesn't look like any of that is happening, which is, again, is an interesting. And then Roger Stone even said, he's Trump's big buddy. I guess they don't want to talk about things getting violent anymore, so we wanted any demonstrations to be peaceful, legal, and civil. But there seems to be, as you were reporting, nothing at all, which is...
Yeah, and of course, all this could change in a terrible heartbeat, which is,
Yes, 3 o'clock. He's supposed to be...
What Jim said as well. But as it stands right now, it's basically, I can't even count how many media, and a few hundred Trump supporters. I counted 10 anti-Trumpers who were actually just basically dressed up and again in protest performance, which I'm not saying is a derogatory term, but I mean it's just odd. The whole thing is just very odd.
Sue, I wonder if you're a lesbian. Your newspaper is the biggest gay lesbian paper around here, Bay Windows. I'm wondering it's Pride Month. Does it feel different being down there in Florida? I mean, are you worried that Ron DeSantis, what was your line, Jim?
Is going to send you to Martha's Vineyard against your will.
Yeah, deport you out of the country. I mean,
Martha's Vineyard is in the country, I think.
Yeah, right. Well, deport her out of the country, Jim, is in addition to Martha's Vineyard, or instead of Martha's Vineyard.
Apologies.
I should have brought my immigrant daughter with me, so we could definitely get a free trip.
I mean, does it feel different? I would be nervous about going to Florida if I were gay.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So that's a good question, Marjorie. And I did have conversations with members of my family who were concerned about me traveling to Florida for two reasons. One, the anti-LGBTQ stuff, which I had to either I'm naive or I just think I can manage my way. I said I'll just drive to Disney and throw myself at the gate if something bad happens. But there's also the issue of just the guns. How many weapons are down here? Which is aside from the sort of I'm not in I am a lesbian, but I'm not in a situation where I fear that something's going to happen to me that's going to impact care I get or who I'm with. I mean, I'm traveling with a whole bunch. Whole team from NBC10 Boston is down here. But what's interesting to watch with the international media is how much security they have while they're down here covering this. So
because of the guns?
I didn't ask them why, because I didn't want to really out that I could see that they actually had security with them.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely have people standing around them, watching the crowd. And again, yesterday it was almost nothing. I just want to be clear again. But there's an apprehension of being down here that it's not like other places.
Yeah.
So besides the fact that we're in the media, which make us more of a target than general, we're not wearing our badges out, except when we're on the courthouse property for the most part. It does feel different to your point, yes.
Hey, before you go, you may have no greater insight just because you have physical proximity than we do. Reading the stories this morning about how Trump's legal team was trying to hire a local lawyer, which is what one does if you're in a jurisdiction. You always try to hire a prominent local person who knows the rules, knows the judges, knows the magistrates. They were unsuccessful getting anybody, either because of Trump's reputation, because they may end up before the Department of Justice, or even worse, they might not get paid, which is generally what happens to Trump's lawyers. Did he ever get a local lawyer?
No, he's actually being allowed to be represented, I think, by one of his existing lawyers, because this is really, I know this is a big deal and it's historic, but it's also, as you know, Jim is a lawyer, it's just kind of a paperwork issue here, right? He's going to show up, he's going to say
not guilty.
He's not guilty, and they'll decide something, and then this all moves on.
That's true.
So the judge, I believe, is allowed to decide if someone can just represent him. I mean, I actually talked to some folks last night who were positing that it wouldn't it be funny if he had to get a public defender because he couldn't get anyone to defend him, because not only do people who work with Trump not get paid, they often end up getting in trouble.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
Remember, the reason this is happening to some degree is because he wanted to implicate his lawyers in this whole scheme of keeping these documents, who then had to pierce the client, the lawyer-client privilege.
Yeah.
So, what do you have to be thinking in order to do anything with Donald Trump? You're not going to get paid. You may end up disbarred, and you may end up in jail yourself. So,
other than that, it's a great gig.
Other than that, it's a great gig.
Yeah.
It's a great gig.
It's really
and
great.
then you won't, you can't go on MSNBC anymore.
That's
you
right.
Run around with Project
That's right.
Stone, tattoos, going to
Hey, Sue,
sex parties.
you're really kind to give us some of your time today. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. Stay safe, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very
Sue
much,
O'Connell.
Sue.
See
You've
you,
been
Sue.
talking to our media maven, Sue O'Connell, co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, and contributor to Current on NBC, LX, and NECN. So coming up, we're going to spend the rest of the show getting your thoughts on the indictment of former President Trump as his arraignment approaches about 3 o'clock this afternoon. You can call us and text us 877-301-8970. That's 877-301-8970. What do you think? What do you think about the Judge Eileen Cannon overseeing this case? What do you think about the fact that the courtroom is essentially closed to anybody who can't wait in line overnight or for hours to get in there? No video, no sound, no nothing. What do you think about the charges against the former president? What do you think of the whole thing? A President Trump arraignment potpourri is next on Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
GBH members, you can explore the best PBS dramas, nature, science, music programs, and more with GBH Passport. GBH Passport is an on-demand library packed with thousands of episodes of your favorite PBS programs and award-winning films. Stream at home on your smart TV or on the go on your phone, tablet, or laptop. If you're already a member, register today or join us as a member and start streaming your favorite PBS shows at gbh.org/passport.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And National Grid, providing access to electric heat pumps which offer heating and cooling for businesses of all sizes to help them achieve their sustainability goals. You can learn more about heat pump technology at ngrid.com/future. And LabShares Newton, offering BL2 labs, private suites, individual benches, and shared equipment for emerging biotechs. Located next to the Charles River, near Cambridge and Boston. You can learn more at labshares.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. Friday, we'll be back at the library. The governor will be with us for the 12 to 1 hour for Ask the Governor. You know what that means. So the former president of the U.S. is being arraigned today at 3 o'clock on 37 federal charges. General public won't be able to see it, as we've just mentioned, hear it, or even hear it reported on as it's happening. The judge overseeing the district has banned cameras before and during the proceedings, also denied media requests to make audio available afterwards. And as we said, reporters can't even use their cell phones or laptops thanks to a separate judge's ruling. This is an historic event. Boy, talk about understatement. During a time when even the most basic facts are questioned in this country, and we won't be able to witness it, even though it's being done in our name. So we're opening the lines, as Marjorie said, for the remainder of the show on anything relating to Trump's arraignment at 3 o'clock. Jamie, I'm right, NPR is going to pick up, even though they can't be in the courtroom, at 3 o'clock there'll be special coverage here on National Public Radio, which we will pick up on 89.7 of the proceedings as best they can. Do you care that it's not televised? Are you okay with not being transported into the courtroom through live tweets or anything else? Do you care about that, or is it just us? We're talking about this. Whatever else related to the indictment moves you. 877-301-8970 is our number. By the way, I'm not just upset about this. I am outraged about this. The notion that there is not a hue and cry that we have a right to be in that courtroom, and this total BS in 2023, this may have been true 30 years ago, that it's going to affect the behavior of the lawyers. So be it. If it affects the behavior of the lawyers or the witnesses or whatever it is. Today, Trump obviously is not going to be witnesses today. It's just going to be prosecutors, defense lawyers, Trump, and I guess all the other court personnel. I think it is an outrage that we are not able to be privy to this thing being done in our name.
You know, I remember back when, a million years ago, when the O.J. Simpson trial went on, that was televised, state court, obviously. There was, Judge Ito was supposedly performing for the camera. I remember Jay Leno used to have the
Dancing Itos.
The Dancing Itos on his TV show. But that was a long, long time ago. I mean, I think to be able to watch a trial, especially something like this, it's of such magnitude and such historic importance, they've got a hell of a nerve, the judiciary, to be so closed-minded about this whole thing. But it goes on right here in Boston. Why shouldn't the citizens of Boston, the people who ran the marathon, who were injured in the marathon, the families of those who lost their lives, be able to watch the trial of Johar Tsarnaev every single solitary day? And you know what else? You know, I used to cover a lot of trials as a reporter.
Whitey Bulger.
Or Whitey Bulger. I mean, it really, at a time when people are so suspicious of the government and don't like the government and blah, 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 it really, for the most part, I find it very encouraging in terms of the seriousness the jurors usually bring to the case, and sometimes the lawyers aren't so great, but lots of times, especially if the defendant has a lot of money, the lawyers are really fantastic.
Hey, by the way, Marjorie, you don't see the jurors; they're always but the proceeding is what
you
Marjorie
don't exactly.
means. Yeah.
That's a good point. They don't show they have rules in the courtroom, and you're not allowed to show the faces of the jurors. So,
you know, having said that, that matters to me a lot, particularly today. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is a really important day, as we discussed on Friday. Was it Friday the indictments came down? I think it was Friday. That someone who, at least if the allegations are true, has committed a large number of crimes that are really dangerous for this country, for our intelligence community, for the people who serve this country, has the potential to be held accountable. The only part of this, other than the camera and audio thing, that is so disturbing is to continue to see, despite the lack of protesters or Trump supporters today, is to continue to read people say, this won't affect my vote at all, doesn't matter. Even people who don't say the government's corrupt and this is a political trial kind of thing. Do you also, one of the stories that was given to us by our colleagues today, did you see, not only is almost everybody they interviewed in Florida who's a Trump voter historically planning to vote for him again, did you read the comments of people who didn't know until the reporter voiced it to them that Trump had been indicted?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, are they upright and breathing?
I don't know. I will say that they have conceded, even on Fox News, that he's been indicted. So there's been a lot of discussion. And Bill Barr, the former Attorney General who called Donald Trump his former buddy toast, he said toast on Fox News. So Fox News is definitely covering it. I don't know how you can't know that he's been indicted. But I tell you what, I was nervous.
About what?
I was nervous about violence. I mean, you had Andy Biggs, the Arizona Republican, talking about an eye for an eye. You had Carrie Lake talking about...
Didn't he say this is the beginning of the war? A war is what Biggs said.
We've reached a war phase,
That's right.
is how he put it. And there were a lot of pro-Trump forums. There was a post on Friday that said MAGA will make Waco look like a Tea Party. And of course, Waco was where people in the Branch Davidians, I think there was 70 or 80 of them that died in that terrible
including
fire.
A lot of kids.
Including a lot of children, absolutely right. So I was worried that this was going to be a repeat. Not maybe as large because they had the intelligence coming in many days before the January 6th thing, but I was afraid of some kind of violence. And I'm glad that there's not that, but I'm rather surprised that there isn't more peaceful protesting going on on both sides.
Yeah, let's take some calls. Jeff and Shirley, you're first on Boston Public Radio, an hour and a half before the arraignment of Donald J. Trump. Hey, Jeff.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good, thanks. What's
Fine,
up?
thank you.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different position with respect to being able to televise everything in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it in terms of Trump's ability to manipulate the media, the issue is, what's the worst thing that could happen if all the cameras are on? And in my view, the worst thing that can happen is Trump starts going off on, everything is unfair, he's being treated unfairly, blah, blah, blah. And the judge is unable to control what he is saying.
I think that would be the best thing, Jeff. There is nothing better, Jeff. There is nothing better for this country than to see Donald Trump ignoring the edicts of a judge in a courtroom. I think it'd be great for our country. Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem?
Trump is in his glory. Trump is in his glory at that point because he's able to control the situation, and he can start saying, I'm a victim, everybody's taking advantage of me, and the judge loses control of the situation.
Yeah, okay.
And instead, we end up with a nightmare of Trump just being able to run over everybody.
I don't think he can do that in a courtroom, even with a judge.
Also, he could hold a press conference the second it's over.
Well, he's going to tonight.
And do the exact same thing, Jeff.
Isn't he going to be addressing everybody tonight? Or
I don't know. He has a fundraiser. I think it is place in either Mar-a-Lago. I think in Mar-a-Lago. Jeff, we respect your opinion. We just disagree. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it. 877-301-8970. There's always an argument. This is not meant critically of Jeff, because a lot of people agree with him. There's always an argument as to why you can't do a camera, why you can't do. Those arguments went out the window when states started having cameras in
murder
courtrooms.
trials.
Can anybody who shares Jeff's position cite for me one example of where a courtroom got out of control because there was audio and video? I don't know of one. There may be one. But the answer is all those. And by the way, we're so critical of the Supreme Court of the United States, as we should be, for being grifters in some cases and liars in other cases. It's not just them. It's lower federal courts that have made the decisions to lock out the American people today. I think that is really. And by the way, if you don't want to watch, don't watch. But we should have an opportunity to watch.
And you know what the other thing is? I mean, it is much more accurate to be able to sit there with your iPad or your computer to take down the information than it is to try to write it, unless you are expert in shorthand. Well, and
that's a hugely important point.
Well, yeah, that matters, doesn't it? I mean, they're interfering with the ability of the media in the courtroom to do their job the best way they can. Joyce from Cambridge, thank you for calling.
Hey, Joyce.
Hi. Called in the past. Listen to you guys constantly.
Thanks.
I'm terrified that Trump will find a way to walk from this. Concerned that they assigned him to a judge who has not been neutral towards him in the past and seems to favor his positions. And whether she would control him in the court or whether she would let him go ahead with the court, I'm not sure, because she doesn't seem to be. One of our more enlightened favorite judges. And as for being locked out or locked in, again, to me, it could go either way. Again, it depends on the judge. And I'm concerned about the judge in this case.
There was a great piece in the New York Times today talking about all the ways the judge could interfere with this case. The biggest one is delay it. And if it were to be delayed till after the election and Trump wins or the Republican wins, then that's the end of the case.
Right, even if he's convicted or if it's pending,
yes,
he could order the Department of Justice to drop the case.
And the other thing, which is very scary, is that she could decide, like she did the last time around, that there's certain evidence that should be admitted into evidence is not going to be admitted into evidence. And Corcoran, this lawyer whose notes were very vital, he was interviewed by the grand jury. She could disagree. I don't know how she can, because it seems like it's pretty settled in law that you can't. The attorney-client privilege can only be pierced if the attorney-client privilege occurred in
furtherance of a crime.
Exactly. And that's why
she can do anything she wants. She can be reversed on appeal like she was last time. People should understand, just for clarification, she is not presiding over the arraignment today. The arraignment is sort of a ministerial thing. This magistrate, Jonathan Goodman, who I know nothing about, but as of the moment, she is the judge in charge of the trial. And if history, as the caller just said, is any guide, based upon how she treated Trump in the documents case a few months ago, there's reason to worry if you want to make sure that there is fairness in this proceeding.
Gary from Wisconsin says, of course it's a witch hunt. They're deciding which crime will put him in jail. I hadn't heard that one before. Had you heard that one?
877-301-8970, 90 minutes away from the arraignment of Donald J. Trump. 37 federal charges, criminal charges, relating to his mishandling of documents at Washington and then Mar-a-Lago. Jane in Arlington, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome. Hi.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Hi.
I want to say how I agree with you 100%. I'm outraged. I think it's not right. I think every trial should be streamed in this day and age.
So do I, yeah.
Who are we keeping secrets from and why? And I don't know who this magistrate is, but it's just not tenable to me that we are a nation of laws and we can't watch the process, especially at the Supreme Court level. That's my 2 cents.
Well, at least we can hear the Supreme Court, and now they at least have the audio. Jane, I'm totally with you. And by the way, we started today's show talking about national assaults on LGBTQ people and LGBTQ rights and tried to localize it. Let's localize this too. Don't we have a state senate in Massachusetts that has voted against making the votes of elected representatives public in committee hearings? Why? Because the public won't understand why they voted yes or no.
Well,
so we have the same disease right here, 10 blocks from our studio.
Our government is working increasingly in secret, if you ask me.
Totally right.
When they have some story in the Globe or on television or wherever, and the reporter calls the person that's in charge, half the time, we see this with the Boston Police Department quite regularly. No comment. They're not going to comment on this. DCF does the same thing. They claim privacy rights or it's a pending investigation, which is really baloney because they don't have to identify the victim in order to tell you the progress of the investigation. Bureau of Prisons, even Congress people can't go in and see what's going on in these federal prisons. So I'm surprised that people don't get more upset about these things. And as you know, in Massachusetts, trying to get records is almost impossible. Sometimes you have to pay for the records. So the government is not really operating for the people. I would say it's operating to hide things from the people at this particular juncture.
Before we get back to the calls, can I mention one other thing? One of the callers mentioned possible recusal by the judge, Eileen Cannon. There's no evidence that she's going to do this. However, let me read to you what the U.S. Code requires of federal judges. This is a quote: to disqualify himself or herself in any proceeding in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. Do you think the impartiality of Eileen Cannon can reasonably be questioned? Nominated by Trump, confirmed. And by the way, that is not a disqualifier. Her behavior is a disqualifier. She was slapped down by the appellate court.
Conservatives, and weren't a couple of those judges nominated by Trump too?
At least one, maybe two. At least, I'm not sure. On an appellate panel, which reasonably raises the question of impartiality. If she really was impartial, she would say, since there's a question about it, I'll recuse myself and let somebody else take the case. And by the way, if people weren't following this on Friday, we are being told, and I assume this is true, Nancy Gertner confirmed this for us too, that there were 3 or 4 judges that were eligible to oversee this case, and there was one of those random drawing things, allegedly, and whose name came up, but Eileen Cannon, the same judge who shilled for Donald Trump when the documents case was earlier before her.
Here's Sue in Acton. The situation is frightening, like a horror film. Trump considers himself above all citizens and should deserve kingly treatment. I remember days living in New York City where he was an arrogant bully. When will this end? That's from Sue in Acton. When you think about it, it is crazy. I mean, he lost. Usually when you lose, you kind of disappear, more or less. I mean, you may be Al Gore and go off and do stuff on climate change or something. You may be Bill Clinton and raise the foundation.
Carter.
Yeah, I mean, you do things that kind of in the public, for public good, sort of after your presidency.
The apolitical world.
But this is like that he lost, and then he just bounces back up like one of those whack-a-moles. When you go to the arcades.
I do indeed.
Just can't keep him whacked down. Let's go to Ron in Seabrook. Hi, Ron.
Hey, Ron.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, I believe it's deplorable that there's so little access to what's going on. I think if you ask the judge, she would say that she's trying to prevent it from devolving into a circus. And I think that's a little humorous because there's literally a clown on trial.
How long did you work on that one?
It occurred to me while I was waiting.
You really? Well, that's
it's a serious
worth the
matter.
wait.
I'm not trying to make light of it.
It's okay.
But I'm bummed, like you said.
But I'm bummed, as they say. Hey, Ron, thank you for the call. We appreciate that. By the way, my understanding, Marjorie, correct me if I'm wrong, the decision so far about no cameras, no audio, no phones, so far is a province of the presiding judge of the whole region and the magistrate. Cannon has nothing to do yet with restrictions in the courtroom try to be fair to her.
I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
Let's take a break.
Okay. Hey, we have a little sound from our local talk show host here, Jim.
We do. You want to play that in a minute?
Yeah, we can play it when we come back. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming live on Facebook.com/GBH News and YouTube.com/GBH News.
It's been shaping our culture, language, and how we dress for decades. But how well do we understand modern ballroom culture? It was a 1990 documentary that first brought the scene to a wider audience. But queer, trans, black, and brown people have competed in balls for more than a century. An art collective? A freedom movement? What role is ballroom playing today? That's next time on 1A.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And The Huntington, presenting the Lehman Trilogy, a story of family, ambition, and risk. Winner of the 2022 Tony Award for Best Play. The New York Post calls it a must-see event, June 13th to July 16th. HuntingtonTheater.org. And the International Fund for Animal Welfare. With less than 340 North Atlantic right whales remaining, IFAW is committed to leading the charge to save them from extinction. To learn more, you can visit rightwhales.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We're talking about all things Trump indictment. He will be arraigned. It's scheduled at least for an hour and 25 minutes from now. Here's an interesting couple of tweets. Norm Eisen, was he the head of ethics for, was it Obama? It was in a Democratic White House. Judge Cannon must recuse from Trump's case under such and such a statute or be reassigned by the 11th Circuit. This is his tweet. Her lawless pro-Trump rulings that were smacked down on appeal mean, quote, her impartiality might be reasonably be questioned. That was retweeted by Larry Tribe, obviously the legendary constitutional law professor at Harvard, who has had at least 2, if not 3 members of the Supreme Court, including Roberts in his classroom, and Barack Obama, and a lot of other, Merrick Garland. I've been arguing this for days, and if our system is too weak, writes Tribe, to achieve her recusal, at the very least, the Chief Justice should direct the entire trial be televised to ensure vitally needed transparency. That is such a better argument than I've made, that if we have a judge whose partiality is clearly in doubt, she won't recuse herself, yet even more important reasons that the public see whether the trial is conducted fairly. That's the argument that should control.
Well, that's what's so scary about the evidence. I mean, she shut down the ability of the FBI to get a lot of these documents last time around. That's what the appeals court shut her down on. So you can see if she prevents a lot of evidence from coming into this trial, that could mean an easy walk for the former president. A couple of people are texting about where John King is. He's going to stay with us on Tuesdays, even though he is doing a different job now. But he's down there right now, I believe, in Miami, down in the courtroom. So he couldn't join us today. Let's go to Susan in Cape Cod. Hi, Susan.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I love you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I've got to a couple of times. But anyway, I was down Hollywood, Florida, for a good month. I just took off with my new Jeep because I'm out of here, right? But there were a lot of people for Trump down there. In fact, my daughter didn't really want to ride my new Jeep down there. She wanted me to rent a car, but and what if, in fact, a lot of the jurors that they have down there, they'd be on his side because they're local. And there's a lot of people that Trump, I'm afraid it's going to be a big lie.
Susan, we got to let you go because you're going in and out. We should have brought this up. It's really important. There were 2 jurisdictions in which Jack Smith, the special counsel, could have brought this case. In Washington, where the first acts were taken vis-a-vis the documents, but he allegedly was concerned that there was not enough of a nexus to the crimes and that it was much deeper in Florida. That's why he brought it in there. The point that Susan just made is very valid. There are far more Trump supporters in the jurisdiction where this trial will be held. I assume every listener knows in a criminal trial, if even one juror holds out and won't say guilty, it can be 11-1, and as a result, he is not guilty or there's a hung jury, which means there's no conviction, which makes the voir dire, the questioning of the jury, and in federal court it's done by a judge, incredibly important. But I guess, Susan, to make you feel a little better, Jack Smith, with all due respect, is a lot smarter than all 3 of us. And I would assume he considered this with his colleagues at least as much as you, Marjorie, and I have, and determined that the evidence was so overwhelming that he was comfortable bringing this in Florida. But your concerns, I think, are legit.
I'm very concerned about this, Judge. And you also, right before the
she's talking about the jury.
Well, right before the jury
Yeah.
goes in to decide
Yeah.
the case, the judge gives her little speech.
That's a great instructions.
To the
Totally right.
jury, and
That's a great
you know, I
point.
remember the first trial I ever covered. The jury totally ignored what the judge had to say and came out with a second-degree murder instead of a first-degree murder conviction when the judge told them they had to either do first-degree murder or acquit because of the joint venture option. But oftentimes, that's unusual. Usually the jurors listen very carefully to what the judge says. So again, this woman could have tremendous power to sway
Totally right.
the jury going in. And the evidence you mentioned, again, I'll say it for the third time, she may preclude some of that evidence from getting in, which is really scary. I mean, it just seems like the whole thing. I mean, imagine if it were the other way around and this were some juror that was totally in the tank for Hillary Clinton and that person was going to sit in judgment of a trial involving Hillary Clinton on criminal charges. Can you imagine what the Republicans would be saying about that?
And let's be clear, again, for the second or third time, this is not about her being a Trump nominee. A Trump nominee can be totally fair if his or her behavior on the bench suggests they're an impartial person. This woman's behavior on the bench in a case relating to the documents shows she can't be. What are you laughing about?
Des from Jamaica Plain says, Trump is like a cockroach. He could survive a nuclear war.
Well, so far he has. And by the way, let's put this in context. We have the criminal indictments in New York City around paying off Stormy
Right.
Daniels. We have these 37 charges
Don't
on
forget
which will be...
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Don't forget E. Jean Carroll.
Oh, right. Well, that's a civil finding. That he sexually abused her and defamed her.
Defamed her, that's
and
right.
she's not allegedly,
And she's sued
amending
again,
her
right?
complaint to, her proceeding to deal with the defamation of her that she alleges he did, and I'm with her on this, at the CNN town hall. In August, early August, I think it's the first 2 weeks of August, there'll be indictments handed down in Georgia. Can you find me 11,000 votes around that and the fake electors? We do not know if Trump will be charged. It is fairly likely he'll be charged. And Jack Smith, the special counsel that brought these charges in Florida, is also still investigating the insurrection charges against Trump on January 6th, relating to January 6th. And as we said the other day, I was with Judge Gertner, it appears that if he were convicted on the charges in New York, if he were convicted on these charges, well, Nancy Gertner said there was some twist on the documents that might allow a finding by a court or Congress that he engaged in insurrectionist activity, which is the only thing under the 14th Amendment that would bar him from holding office. Short of that, even a convicted Donald Trump could go to prison,
That's right.
could run for president, could be elected to the presidency from a prison cell. So there's a long way to go to ensure that Donald Trump doesn't do a second term.
Paul from Worcester says Jim may want to tread lightly on Florida judges. There could be a reckless driving case against Danger Jim Browdy down there. Would you care to tell us
There was
what
no
Paul
doubt what I was
is referring
for
to?
those people who weren't paying attention. When I was in Mar-a-Lago for
Jim
a couple
was at
days,
Mar-a-Lago,
I kept driving
wining and dining
every
with the former
morning.
president.
I borrowed a friend's car, a very nice car, I should say, nicer than anything I've ever driven, and I kept driving by Mar-a-Lago. The first day I drove by Mar-a-Lago. Who did I call, Marjorie, for a report from the scene?
You did. You called me, I believe.
Not you, Boston Public Radio.
Oh, Boston Public Radio.
Right, you're
I think
part
I'm
of that.
part of it,
Exactly.
yes.
Okay. So I called Boston Public Radio, but because unlike my car where you just hit a button on the dash and the phone goes off,
Tesla,
this didn't have it. So I had to look down at my phone. As I'm looking down at my phone, after I finished my incredible report from the scene for Boston Public Radio, I rear-ended a pickup truck. Now, the good news is the pickup truck is fine. The bad news is the front of my friend's car is not.
It's always embarrassing when you borrow a friend's car and get the crash,
You know what the
Jim,
good news is?
because you're on your telephone.
I've been driving it a whole hour at that point. Day 1 hour into the trip, and the front of his car is not really in great shape. But I did no damage to the other driver, who was very nice.
Okay, we have
Or
some
his car.
actual sound of the president discussing his case with a local talk show host. That would be Howie Carr. I used to work with him at the Herald.
Over in RKO?
Yes, and RKO, that's correct.
Is this yesterday? It is yesterday, right?
Yesterday afternoon. Is Howie on the afternoon? I think so.
Yeah.
Yesterday afternoon, discussing the arraignment. The first voice you'll hear is Howie Carr, and then you'll hear former President Trump.
The judge is going to ask you tomorrow, how do you plead? Are you going to say anything beyond not guilty? Are you going to make a statement in court tomorrow?
No, I doubt it. I was just saying not guilty. I didn't do anything wrong. They're trying to do this to influence the election. They're trying to turn around the election, trying to turn around their poll numbers. And I think they've overplayed their hand because it's working just the opposite. Nobody ever thought this could happen in our country. And don't forget, I got more votes than any sitting president in history, by a lot.
By the way, he's right when he said no one ever thought this could happen in our country. That is exactly right, Donald Trump. By the way, the thing we were unable to find, if anybody happened to be listening to Howie Carr yesterday, we read the story in the Herald. We tried to find out, how did Carr, who joined Mar-a-Lago, am I not right, in the last couple of years? How did Carr react? Was he supportive of Trump? Did he think this is a weaponization of the judiciary? The Justice Department by angry, scared Democrats? If anybody knows what he had to say,
he has been as I said, big supporter of Trump, and he joined Mar-a-Lago. So I would guess that he was supporting the president.
Oh, here is actually Jamie, our colleague, actually listened to this, the whole segment before Trump called in, how he was mocking the whole thing, meaning the indictment, taking calls. So I guess he's on Donald Trump's side. 877-301-8970 is our number.
Irene from Melrose, thank you for calling.
Hey, Irene.
Thanks for taking my call. I love you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I am thrilled that someone who tried to get rid of the justice system is now going to see it up close.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We hope it's the justice system in action in a just kind of way. That's what I think a lot of us are worried about, Irene. No?
Well, that's true. But two things. I think we, as a United States of America, would have looked a lot worse if we hadn't brought these charges. Because not only is this country watching, but the whole world.
Well, you know, Irene, thanks for the call. The best answer to that question was given by a guy who's not in politics. Rick Steves was with us the other day after he performed with the Boston Pops. We asked him a question about how a number of European, not just European countries, but European countries in particular, since that's where he focuses his work, have indicted, tried, and sent to jail some of their former leaders. And we asked him, you know, do you worry about the consequences of trying, convicting, and potentially jailing former president of the United States? And his quick answer was, I worry more about the failure to do that. And he mentioned popularly elected leaders, Mussolini, Hitler, and how fascism was allowed to rise because they were allowed to do whatever the hell they pleased. And I think he made a wonderful point. And as I also made the point the other day, interviewing Jill Wine-Banks, who was I think the only woman on the Watergate prosecution team, saying that she was the holdout who thought they should proceed against Richard Nixon specifically to help ensure that a future president would think twice before he or she engaged in that kind of behavior. And Donald Trump didn't have to think twice, because not only has he gotten away with it forever, Richard Nixon got away with something far less
Well,
serious.
you know what's incredible? When you read this indictment, I mean,
it's incredible.
It is incredible. And it's not that long. I mean, it was 38 or 40,
47, I think,
47 pages or whatever, but it's not that long. It moves pretty quickly. And, you know, he knew that he had all these other documents, and he actively had people hiding them around the place.
He's telling his lawyers, how about getting rid of them?
How about getting rid of them? We're saying we don't have any. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the lawyers had to know that they were in a little hot water.
That's why
there.
he has no lawyers.
That's why he has no.
Well, he has two. How about the photographs? How about the photographs in the bathroom?
Yeah.
On the stage in a ballroom.
I know.
I mean,
and you also think, why did he do this? I mean, there's a lot of speculation. The main speculation seems to be so he could show them off.
I think that's
to
exactly
other people.
what it is.
Not that he was necessarily trying to sell secrets. Let's hope he wasn't to our enemies, but that he could say it was a big deal where he's waving around the thing about didn't like General Milley, and so he was waving around this attack plan to attack Iran, saying that I was right and General Milley was wrong. So I guess that was it. But you just think he had to know when he get a subpoena, and they were after him over and over again to get these documents back, that this is going to leave him in a little bit of hot water.
So if you're a 76-year-old man who is a narcissist and a megalomaniac who has escaped liability for every bad thing you've ever done in your whole life without exception, why would you think you're not going to escape liability here? You wouldn't.
I guess because they were of such sensitive material, nuclear secrets about our capabilities, other countries' capabilities, secrets about war plans. You know, I mean,
he's a small man who had an incredible position of power, and he has such an inferiority complex, at least I think, that as you say, he's got to brag to reporters, to staff people, to lawyers. Look at the documents I have. Look at the crowd I had at the inaugural. Look at how many votes I got, the most of any sitting president, failing to say, by the way, that was fewer votes than the guy who beat me in the last election.
You know, when you talk about his inferiority complex, I always go back to the book that his niece wrote, and she grew up with him, and she grew up with the family, and she knows all about the family, and she knows about his extremely cruel father.
What she did was his father, too. Her father. His brother, her father.
Her father was the alcoholic, and how cruel Donald Trump was to the brother. But it gives you real insight into the cruelty that he grew up in from the time he was a little tiny boy, which I guess is maybe still playing out in his presidency or his ex-presidency. Jennifer from West Roxbury, thanks for calling.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm really upset with the press and in a way you guys too, for the last week, this is all that has been on every news report. Nothing about what's being accomplished by the current president. And as Jim just said, he is a megalomaniac, Trump. And this is just doing exactly what he wants.
Okay, so Marjorie and I are totally responsible for that decision. Tell us, you sat in our production meeting a week ago, 3 to 4 days ago when he was indicted. Tell us what your direction would be for us about how much we should cover or not cover the first president in the history of the United States of America being charged with federal crimes.
I agree that it's unprecedented and it's important, but I think it should come down in terms of its priority. I mean, Biden has accomplished so much. Today, one of the news stories is inflation has been cut by half since a year ago. That's major. That affects people. And we're doing the media is doing exactly what Trump wants.
Well, you know, I mean, Jennifer, you do have a good point, though. I mean, this guy is like, you almost can't keep away from him. I mean, I did think it was too bad that the whole debt ceiling thing, it was done in a day. You know, Biden got a lot of credit for, despite all of us saying, oh, he has to come out and be more forceful about this, has to give a speech and stuff. He did his very slow behind the scenes work, and he managed to, I would say, outfox the Republicans and have very little loss to them in that debt ceiling battle. And he's done, you know, the whole Inflation Reduction Act, although it didn't bring down inflation then, it did do a lot of things about climate change. So you're right. I mean, generally we don't pay that much attention to what presidents are doing, but when it's something like this, you know what I mean? I mean, this has never happened in the whole time of the entire country, so it's hard not to focus on this. You can still read all the other stories in the newspapers, Jennifer. That's why I love them.
But it's sort of like this is a pep rally for him. MSNBC, CNN,
Jennifer, I got to interrupt you. Jennifer, a pep rally for a guy who is being accused of conspiracy and obstruction of justice, who's a former president. He may like the coverage. I would argue it is not exactly positive coverage. It's about as negative as you can get. And the fact that there are people in this country who are, Marjorie doesn't like when I say this, so I'll say it softly, stupid enough to continue to support a guy who is credibly accused of serious crimes and is already found liable for sexual abuse. The fact that he may like it doesn't mean that it's good. I think what we're doing is reporting the facts. They're huge, historic, important, and you're right. We probably need to spend more time on the accomplishments or lack of accomplishments of other leaders, but today, respectfully, is not the day.
Well,
Jennifer, thanks for your thoughts.
I'll give my little plug once again for newspapers.
Yeah.
You get all those stories in newspapers. You know, if you're on cable television or a radio show, you play the hits, as it were, and this is the hit today. But that's why it's so important that people do read the newspaper. Mary and Weymouth.
Yeah, but let's not be defensive about this. This is not putting a camera on the empty podium like was done in 2016.
That was
when
bad.
Trump is going to give a speech in an hour. This is covering history, a very negative history vis-a-vis the defendant, a very positive history as far as I'm concerned about the justice system working as it's happening.
Mary from Weymouth, thank you for calling.
Hey, Mary.
Hi there.
Hi.
Well, I do think that this is important that you're covering this. I think it's very important. And I was just in a supermarket in Plymouth where you have to bag your own groceries, and a woman wearing a American flag baseball cap just started spouting how we shouldn't be in helping Ukraine. And I was like, you don't think we should defend a country that's been invaded? And she's like, not since Biden got $5 million from them. And I'm like, no proof. And she's like, Biden's a doddering idiot. He doesn't even know his brain. And I'm like, not true. Anyway, she gets down to Trump loves this country. Trump loves this country. And I just said, you know, I really wish you well because you need help.
That's a hell of an exchange. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary. You're not done. Go ahead.
Well, this was a Florida grand jury, Florida residents that saw this evidence and decided it needed to move forward. And I just take real great hope out of that.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, there's an obsession with all the money that Joe Biden made in Ukraine. His son may have done some very bad things. The Department of Justice is investigating him, but so far there is no evidence that Biden himself, the father, made money, despite what you hear over and over again spouted at certain news sites, including Chuck Grassley's claims and all this kind of stuff. People just throw out these lies.
Well, how about Trump the other night about the 1,850 boxes that that Biden has? He failed to mention the vast majority are from when he was a senator. He's not covered by the Presidential Records Act when he was a senator. And the few classified documents that were discovered in his home and in his office, he turned over immediately. He didn't tell his lawyers to destroy the documents. He didn't say, let's lie and say we don't have them. He didn't order his personal aide to move the boxes and not tell the lawyers. I mean, it is, Mary, thanks for the call. Have that woman call us tomorrow.
Well, that's the thing. If Trump had handed these documents back, we would not be in Miami now awaiting his arraignment, right? He would not have been charged with anything. Anyway, we are done for today. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by our national security expert, Juliette Kayyem, Carol Rose from the Massachusetts ACLU, GBH's Jared Bowen about arts and culture, a little break from all the political news.
Well, also, speaking of history, the Tonys made history. I'm sure we're going to talk about that,
Oh, the Tonys, that's right.
Yep.
Medical ethicist Art Kaplan, and for a soothing segment, our naturalist and author, Cy Montgomery, with another edition of A Ride Through the Animal World. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Shay Sullivan. Our engineer is John LeClaw Parker. Our executive producer is Jenny Bologna. Thanks to the BPL team, Angelica Marrero, Evelyn Brito, and Brad Lewis.
Did you mention 3 o'clock NPR is going to cover as best they can the arraignment of the president, obviously from not inside.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to see him.
Or hear him. Or tweet about him. Or text about him.
Yeah, because we're going to come into the motorcade and going to go out in the motorcade.
No, we're not even going to see him enter because there's an underground garage.
Right,
so
but I think we'll see the motorcade.
Oh, the motorcade.
Yes,
yeah,
we'll see the motorcade.
Yeah.
We won't see the hair of the President of the United States.
We'll talk about it tomorrow, though. Have a great day.
We'll talk about it tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. And it's Jim.